Okay, so I've got that turned up way too high. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look, like I said, at the posture stuff today. Oh, of course, it jumped all the way back up. So our three sort of static common postural distortions that we're going to see are going to be, we call it pes planus syndrome, or pronation distortion syndrome, as it's much more commonly called. They started calling it pes planus distortion. This textbook and like nobody ever uses that term. I mean, technically it is a dysfunction of the pes planus, but most people just call it pronation distortion syndrome. That's the most common version, because as we look at it, it's going to be characterized by flat feet, knee valgus, adducted and internally rotated hips. So again, we kind of go back to this here. It kind of looks something, if we sort of this is the same thing we did in person the other day, but if you sort of like analyze what's going on with the posture here, right? We sort of take a look at this. We're seeing overactivity, our overactive muscles. We'll put those in red. This is what we're doing sort of excessive, right? We're doing way too much of this. So what we're seeing a lot of is obviously like the foot pronation. So we'll list that out. We are also going to see that is excessive tibial external rotation. So we're seeing way too much of that here. So we'll say tibial external rotation. So way too much of that. And then we are also seeing that is going to be those adducted thighs. So we're seeing way too much adduction there. Adduction. And then lastly, we are also seeing excessive internal hip rotation. So we're going to see some tight internal hip rotators. So hip internal rotation. So we're going to need to kind of turn all of these things off. Like we're going to need to sort of deactivate these really tight muscles so that we can restore our posture. That's what we're going to address in our warm-up. We've been talking a little bit about that lately, right? In your warm-up, you're a little bit of SMR and your whatever category of stretches. If it was a level 1 client in stabilization, you would do static stretches. If it was a level 2 client in strength, you would do generally active isolated stretches. And if it were a level 3 client, we're going to get into this today, it'll be sort of general overall mobility through like dynamic movements. Although that is where we get a little bit less specific about posture. A lot of times our dynamic movements are oftentimes more activation techniques than anything. But there we go, right? We kind of see like in our static position, the ankle joint is experiencing pes planus or foot pronation. The knee joint is experiencing knee valgus, and it says internal rotation here. That's internal rotation from the femur. But your tibia is doing external rotation. So there is a little bit of specificity there that I think gets a little confusing. And then in your hip joint, we are seeing hip internal rotation. Again, that's why I don't like that they listed that twice. I think that's what makes it confusing. And we're seeing, obviously, a little bit of hip adduction with like that knee valgus, right? So basically now we got a list of what we need to sort of turn off, right? Let's go ahead and make some space here. Just going to move this kind of like that. That should be enough. Now let's talk about like what we need to turn on, right? So again, like what we need to sort of like strengthen, we need to go this way, right? We want to get that foot more supinated, right? So we have limited foot supination. We have limited tibial.
For example, see this lady sprays like you are the one that sponsor her. You sponsor her direct. What I'm trying to say, this company work and binary, one on the left, one on the right. Then you sponsor praise. If another person want to come again, you are going to sponsor them.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna Love Patra, just so you know, you're chatting with everybody right now. I can't quite Megan, are you with us? Okay. So let's go. So there's our excessive foot supination. Having some kind of technical difficulty there. Let's go ahead and take a look. We also see, like I said, we have too much tibial external rotation. We obviously need more tibial internal rotation. And then we see we've got excessive adduction. So obviously, in response to that, we're going to try to get some more abduction. I guess I should be saying like hip abduction, but that's kind of a given. And then we need more hip external rotation, right? Okay, so now we've sort of, again, we've kind of broken down, you know, what we've got too much of and what we need more of, right? And I know we've already kind of gone through this, but let's talk about like some example ways that we can fix this. I've got a really good video to show you guys here. That's kind of break this pronation distortion syndrome down. It's got its suggestions for how to fix it, and then I'll go through with you guys and we'll sort of like create a couple of our own sort of examples here. So let's take it over to the YouTubes. All right, where are you? Okay. So this is going to be kind of interesting. He's actually going to more address this from the feet turnout perspective. This gets a little bit more specific to the like the overhead squat, but really good example here for the feet turnout. You guys should recognize this video if you've seen my email. It's going to have some really good example. So we're going to watch this, and then we'll also take a pit stop up here on this one as well. I will say, if you guys are looking for a really, really great study tool, NASM's YouTube channel, obviously, we show that because, you know, they want us to show that. So I work those videos in as often as I can. They're very, 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 very good. However, this company right here, Axiom Fitness Academy, they're honestly, if I'm being honest with you guys, they are a SOCHi competitor. You know, they are one of our sort of good friendly rivals here. They put out really good content. I love their stuff. I think they do a really good job. So he's got a really good breakdown of this as well. It is not officially put out by NASM. It is put out by a company similar to SOCHi, that is approved by NASM, but like, you know, isn't directly their content. The only thing is their production quality is a little bit lower. You can tell it's just like a camera set up in the gym, but the guy is very, very knowledgeable. I think he does a really, really good job. So we're going to go ahead and watch both of these here real quick, starting with this little 3-minute one here. And I'll just try to mute that for now. Put this on the sound share. All right.
For our overhead squat assessment, from the anterior view, we're going to begin by looking at the feet. When one squats, their feet should be able to stay nice and straight. The common compensation that we see is the feet turning out. So for Claire, we'll go ahead and line her up, 5 kinetic chain checkpoints. Feet, knees, and hips are nice and neutral. Neutral position there in the hips, and shoulders are down and back. Now we'll ask her to reach both of her hands all the way overhead. Now from that anterior view, we're only going to look at the feet and the knees. We'll ask her to squat 3 to 5 times, about to the height of a normal chair. What we can see there immediately is that her feet start to turn out. We'll ask her just to do one more, and you can go ahead and relax. If we can see the compensation, there's no reason to continue making her squatting. We see her do it, and then we'll just move on from there. Now the muscles that are overactive whenever the feet turn out are the lateral gastrocnemius, the short head of the biceps femoris, and the TFL. Now let's identify those muscles. If you wouldn't mind turning around for me. So whenever we look at the overactive muscles here, when the feet turn out, the overactive muscles, or the muscles which are doing too much, can be identified as the lateral gastrocnemius. Now the lateral gastroc is positioned here. We have the lateral and the medial head. When we look at the gastrocnemius, it crosses both the ankle and the knee. And whenever the knee is slightly bent, so go ahead and come into a small squat there, what we see is that lateral gastrocnemius can help to externally rotate the tibia, which is turning the feet out. In addition, we have the short head of the biceps femoris, which is positioned here. It attaches out to the fibular head and comes up about 1/3 of the way up the thigh. And again, as we go into this squat, if it's overactive, it can turn the foot out and go ahead and stand. And if we could turn and face back towards the camera. In addition, one that's oftentimes left out is the TFL. Now the TFL sits up here near the hip, but what we need to understand is that it attaches to the IT band, and that IT band comes all the way down here and attaches to the front part of the tibia. So if any of those muscles are overactive, which simply means they're doing more than they should, whenever we squat, it will start to turn the feet out. Now the underactive muscles, the muscles that are normally not doing their job, are usually just on the other side of the joint. So with that, we would see the medial gastrocnemius. If you could go ahead and spin around for me again. The medial gastrocnemius is going to be here on the inside. So it's the other side of the joint in the transverse plane with the knee rotation. We can also see the medial side of the hamstring becoming underactive, and the glutes can also become underactive. You can go ahead and spin around again. So whenever we see the feet turn out, the areas we would need to foam roll and stretch would be the lateral gastroc, the short head of the biceps femoris, and the TFL. The areas we would need to activate would be the medial gastroc, the medial hamstrings, and the glutes.
So pretty simple breakdown there, right? Nothing crazier than what we see in our standard sort of textbook or in our standard sheet. So you go to NASM's website over at nasm.org, and you find their resources tab here. Gosh, I hate the way they reorganized this website, actually. Training tools is not a button anymore. Actually, I actually have not quite figured out the right place to go to this the way we're supposed to, at least. That button? No. All right, well, we're gonna go NASM overhead solutions table, or actually no, static, active. What's up, Jose? How you doing? So we go over here to this section. This is where you're gonna find this, right? So we're gonna find our list of overactive, underactive muscles here. So we're looking at pes planus right now. So we kind of zoom in like this. We see our overactive list. We see our underactive list. So going back to my little, like, sort of fake chart that we're making here, right? Again, we're seeing our potential muscle imbalances, right? Overactive muscles, gastrocnemius and soleus, that's going to match up right here. Now, they are taking a basic approach to this, like we just saw in the video, guys. It's not in general your gastrocnemius and soleus. It really is sort of putting emphasis here on the lateral gastrocnemius and the soleus. There's an argument to be made that the medial gastrocnemius is actually underactive, right? Because those two muscles do work opposite each other in that transverse plane, right? You look at your gastrocnemius muscle, right? Your calf, right? If we take a look at this, no, not shopping. It's got two heads on it, right? And so you can see like the two sort of separate sets of fibers there, right? Here and here, that's going to be your lateral and medial sides. Your soleus, there's an argument to be made similarly, but like it's not quite as separated. It's mostly the gastrocnemius there. So this is one of those things where, like, if you're giving your client the tip to like SMR their calves, I always tell my clients, focus primarily on that lateral aspect. So like, while I like this, I think that looks pretty good. I think here you can tell he's very much focused on the soleus. It's on that lower portion of the calf. If you need to get more into the gastrocnemius, you can go a little bit higher up like this guy here. But one thing that I really kind of like about this, pay attention to this picture here very carefully. You'll notice he is primarily on the outer lateral aspect of that gastrocnemius. He's got a much smaller ball here, which is going to give him, a limited amount of surface area. Just the reason that's going to feel harder, by the way, just to give you a little, this is called man flow yoga. That's awesome. Just to give you a little bit of perspective on like why that works. Think about like sort of the physics of the surface area here, right? If you sort of look at just like a triangle, right? And you're putting, let's say 100 pounds worth of weight there. You're putting 100 pounds like right at the apex of that triangle. You could have it over here. It doesn't really matter like where you put it. Either way, like there's 100 pounds pressing down on this part here, right? Versus like if we sort of looked at, a greater amount of surface area, let's say you have a wider foam rolling tool, something like this, and you're putting, the same length bar on it, right? Instead of like experiencing 100 pounds pushing down right here, what you're probably more likely experiencing is like 20 pounds here, and like another 20 pounds here, and like another 20 pounds here. And you're slowly just kind of like distributing this, across the entire bar. So that's why it, if you've ever wondered why like a lacrosse ball feels so much more intense than a foam roller, it's not just because like the lacrosse ball is like harder rubber. It's also like just the physics of how this is breaking down, like the sort of engineering of like how this weight is sort of distributed, So I guess I should have technically made sure these are on the box there, but I think you guys get my point. So if you want to get a little bit more oomph out of your foam rolling, you can use something like an SMR tool like this or a lacrosse ball. And then one thing that I really like about what he's doing here is he is primarily on the outside lateral aspect of his calf, because in my experience, people who have this like external foot rotation, which is what pronation is, right? Part of it is 1/3 external rotation. That lateral aspect of the calf is really going to be our emphasis there. So we're going to kind of work on that. We go back to our sort of sheet here, right? We're also going to see the adductors. Obviously, our adductors are, very much directly responsible. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. Oh, you might have to leave early. Dang it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no sweat, Gabriel. That's totally fine. Sorry, I thought I saw a leg, and I immediately was like, thought that it was gonna be like, hey, what can I do for that? No, what you can do for that is definitely make your appointment on time. And then follow up with me later, and I might have some tips for you. So yeah, skipping to it here, adductors, right? Literally directly adduction here. Like that one should be no surprise at all, right? And then we are seeing a little bit of hip internal rotation. Now, a lot of your adductors do that as well. If you look at like your adductor complex here, it is a lot of muscles. Most of these adductors also facilitate hip internal rotation, right? Most of these adductors, yes, they are literally named adductors. Like it should come as no surprise that what they do is hip adduction. But a lot of them also do. You look at their attachment sites, guys. Like think about like in a transverse way, just very simply like the engineering of like if I had a muscle that reached across, let's say from here, over to here, and it grabbed like this, what direction, based on attaching right here, what direction is this circle going to rotate in if this pulls this way? It's going to rotate the circle like this, right? Like that's what's happening on your femur. So when you look at a lot of these adductor muscles and you look at their insertions, you'll notice that like most of them do hip internal rotation in addition to their adduction. Now, there is an exception to that. You take a look right here, this adductor magnus muscle. If we look at the adductor magnus, it does have two separate sets of fibers that are both attaching on opposites. Actually, that's a great picture. Opposite sides of each other. So this is kind of a weird muscle because it is almost, actually not almost, it is an antagonist of itself. Which is always like a weird thing to say, right? But again, we look at this muscle and we sort of look at its origins and insertions, right? Muscles are going to, they have their line of pull, right? So if we sort of look at the adductor magnus, right? This one, yes, this is pulling, it's attached here. And that's very, very much on the front of the femur. And so where it pulls from this direction, right, it is very much going to pull here, and that's going to cause internal rotation. But if you look at these back fibers here that are originating on the posterior aspect of the ischium there, and they run back, and you can, they actually, that muscle kind of runs back here. I got to kind of give you a little 3D drawing there, or a little X-ray drawing there. It comes back to the back side of your femur. So the posterior aspect of your adductor magnus does a little bit of hip extension, because it's sort of back there. That's why it gets the nickname. A lot of people call it the third hamstring. I don't know if anybody's ever heard that nickname, if you've studied this muscle in particular before. But you sort of look at like how this is pulling. Again, like, there is like a little bit of an argument to be made that like, because it's doing a little bit of hip extension, it might actually be able to pull off a little bit of external rotation. So sometimes people see that and then they go, okay, well, the adductors are not really the problem when it comes to, my internal rotation. But it's like, you've got an entire list of adductors all contributing to internal rotation. And just because one of them is slightly pulling external, no, your adductors are huge when it comes to that hip internal rotation. And then lastly, we've also, now this has got this listed as hip flexors here. This is another example of like being partially true. I think NASM is watering this down a little bit, and they're being a little bit simplistic here. So guys, you've all got this sheet at home. Well, not all of you, but those of you who were with me on Thursday, you've got this sheet at home here. If I were you, one little thing that I would do, and I can't do this because I can't edit this little PDF here, but under hip flexors here, just in parentheses, just put a little parentheses there and write TFL, tensor fascia latae. That TFL muscle is particularly the hip flexor that is responsible for hip internal rotation. And we're a little bit better about it down here. You see under the dynamic posture assessment, when we do the overhead squat and we see knee valgus, there we've got the TFL listed. But they took this kind of watered down approach here because there's kind of an argument to be made that like those adductors that are part of your hip flexor complex might be, so just kind of taking like the basics. They're saying like hip flexors in general. I don't love that approach. I love the specificity of just getting in there, say your TFL. Okay. So really the muscles we kind of come back to, right? Let me zoom out on my little modified chart here. Let's be a little bit more specific about it. When we say like foot pronation, I'm just going to go ahead and put this in italics here. What we really mean with that is we are talking about the lateral. Oh God, what have I done? Okay, well, I broke it. Lateral gastrocnemius and soleus, right? So those two muscles in particular are what are contributing to that foot pronation, right? Also, guys, just I'm going to put one that's up and actually not up there. This is just another really big one that's really helpful. And you're not seeing it anywhere on this list. And I know everybody in here has got different levels of kinesiology that they've been through and stuff. But one muscle that you also might want to include, and you can kind of put this in the margins as well. You can put this under foot turnout. And you can put this under like overactive muscles here. There's a huge argument to be made for your peroneals. So your peroneals are also very much a contributor. They are directly responsible for foot eversion. So we take a look at that peroneal group just so that we're sort of familiar with it a little bit better. You can see all those muscles along the side of the shin there, longus, brevis, tertius, all of those muscles. I mean, look at them, like they're literally running north and they're directly attached to the outside of the foot. So they are a huge contributor to that, foot eversion, right? They're just going to scoop it up out to the side. You can even place your hand right here on the outside of your thigh which will make my balance easier. And then evert like this, and you'll feel that contract directly. So, again, we have excessive foot eversion. We need to get a little bit better at that inversion, or we can stretch this muscle very simply. You can go here. I find that this is not a particularly great stretch for that muscle, but like even just like inverting my foot, you can feel a little bit. But particularly a really good peroneal stretch is just kind of drag that foot behind you backwards like this, right? Literally just cross it over your midline, drag the top of your foot on the ground. You'll feel a really terrific stretch right in here. So any of my foot collapsing folks from Thursday, right? This is going to be that's actually a really great stretch you can do, while you're waiting in line at a store. Or you can also do like a seated version. If you're sitting down, like so, you can also just kind of grab your foot and give that a pull there. That's also a really, really good peroneal stretch. So, okay, so I do want to add that one. That's just kind of a me thing. So we're gonna put the peroneals in there. We'll put an asterisk next to that one because obviously it's not officially listed. Trust me though, been doing this a long time, worked on a lot of feet over the years. So then we got our tibial external rotation here. Now I will say NASM, again, they're doing a sort of a watered down approach here. We don't see a lot of tightness. We don't have any hamstring muscles listed specifically here. But again, we go back down to like feet turn out here in the overhead squat. We see the hamstrings complex. Particularly, it's that biceps femoris. And particularly, it is the short head. It's all of it. I mean, it is the whole biceps femoris, but I mean, there's really like a lot going on with the short head in particular there. So that's another one I'm going to put a little asterisk next to, just because it's not directly being called out on this sheet. I barely didn't give myself enough room there. We are running out of room. Let's move this down here so we can save it. And then, we'll have enough room to do our underactive muscles in a second. So that biceps femoris short head, very much a contributor to that tibial external rotation. Let's take a look at that anatomy just so that makes sense. Take a look here. Right. So you get your long head and your short head of your biceps femoris. Actually, I'll use this one. Here's a really good one. So you can see there's your long head. And yeah, it's tied to the outside of the foot. So obviously that's going to cause a little bit of that like tibial external rotation. But the really big bad here is this jerk muscle right here. Now, I got a lot of beef with this muscle because it's been tied on me for my whole life. And so like we are mortal enemies. So if I talk trash about any muscle, it's always the biceps femoris short head. It's my nemesis. But you can see, right? It starts on the middle of the femur. So it's not even a contributor. Like your other hamstring muscles contribute to hip extension a little bit because they are attached at the hip. This one is only contributing to one thing, and that's that tibial external rotation. This is another one that's really easy for you guys to feel. If you want to feel this muscle contract, go into a standing position, or I guess you could do it while you're seated, but bend your leg because that's going to allow you to unlock your knee. And then you can do, once your knee is bent, you can actually twist here. But you can place your hand right on the back of your thigh, about 3/4 of the way down your femur, and just give that a little external turn. Then you will literally feel right there in the back that biceps femoris short head contracting. Technically, it takes place up here at the hip as well, because the long head does a little bit. But honestly, that short head is just such a little punk. And I will say, you can even see here, look at where we start to draw like the tendon and fascia that's on the back of the on the posterior aspect there. Actually, Ken Hub never draws any of the fascia because they put everything in green. There's a good one. Oh, I'm trying to look with slightly more realistic drawing. There we go. You can see there is a lot of like tendon and a lot of fascia there. So it makes sense that like this does get tight because we look at some anatomy that's nearby, like your IT band. You look at that anatomy, tons of fascia, tons of tendon, right? And you even look at your like vastus lateralis, that quadriceps muscle on the lateral side there. Again, tons of fascia, tons of tendon, right? So it does make sense that this gets really tight. It's very much like a heavy like collagen, fiber that tends to tighten up and experiences inflammation and stuff. But just I hate this muscle. We are not friends. Been working on this damn thing for years. It's still not loose. So there's our biceps femoris, particularly, like I said, the short head. Now for adduction, this one's really easy. It's directly on our little list here. We got the adductors. You go over here, we got the adductor complex. So we're literally just going to say adductor complex. No surprise there at all. And then for our hip internal rotation, that's also kind of the adductor complex we talked about. But in particular here, it's that tensor fascia latae, or TFL is obviously what we're all going to say. So that TFL muscle again. Now, oh no, I missed. So there we go. TFL, tensor fascia latae, very much a contributing factor. So now we've got a really, really good list of muscles that like we can give our clients a little bit of homework on to work on with their foam roller, with their static stretches, whatever it happens to be. We got a lot of options here for how we can write our programs, really gives us a good jumping off point here for effective program design. Instantly I look at somebody who's dealing with this posture, and I already know like what their warm-up is pretty much gonna look like, right? So I'll go over here and just open up a brand new sort of OPT template. If it opens up not behind my video. So there's my blank OPT. I still use this one. This is a slightly modified one, guys, than the one that's available on NASM's website. This is just the one that I like because it has duration listed here. But I mean, it's all the same thing. I will say this does say activation now, so I should fix that. And then that's skill development stuff. So if I've got a client, let's say like, their goal is to fix pronation, distortion, syndrome, or their pes planus, right? So that's my client. Now, generally, if I'm doing mostly corrective exercise, what phase of training am I in? I'm in phase 1. You know what I mean? Like this is probably a beginner client in a stabilization routine, right? Sorry, my mama's texting me. She found some crazy workout in our hometown. She's like, should I do this? And I'm gonna have to read her the riot act after this. So there's our I'm probably putting this client in phase 1, stabilization, right? So I look at this, I'm not going to necessarily have to foam roll every one of these, right? Like this is a pretty long working list here, like last gastric nemus, the peroneals, working on foam rolling every single one of these before every single workout. I would spend, maybe 20 minutes warming my client up. And obviously, like I don't want to spend their entire training session just in a warm up, but there's some really big ones that are like very common that pop out a lot to me. And it's definitely gonna be that gastric nemus, adductors, and TFL. I might just start with that, right? Does that mean that biceps femoris that I obviously hate so much doesn't make the list? Maybe not today, right? If they're doing a lot of hamstring work in particular today, then I might emphasize that in particular. But this is like a total body routine. Or maybe it's like a very big like weight loss routine where I'm going to have them on their feet a lot, right? I'm definitely sort of going south, prioritizing like the foot and ankle complex. So we'll go like SMR. I like just put a colon there and then list out whatever muscles I'm working on, because like your foam rolling muscle names don't really have like specific exercise names. Like it's not called like a windmill or anything like that. It's just SMR calves, SMR this, SMR that, you know. So I like to, the one way that I like to save myself a little bit of space here without burning up too many of my boxes. SMR, we're gonna go calves, right? I'm not listing gastric nemus. My client probably doesn't know what that is. I'm gonna go with an SMR for the adductors. I'm gonna go SMR on that TFL. Now, over here in the coaching tips, this is where I can be a little bit more specific. All right, so I might put a coaching tip in there that says like, hey, focus on lateral aspect of calves, right? So I put a little coaching tip in there saying like, hey, like in particular, because I know that it's the lateral aspect of their gastric nemus, I'm putting a little note to them saying like, hey, like turn your feet slightly out so you can expose that lateral half of your calf, right? Just a little foot turn out there can get you to really target like the spot that I'm looking for. Now SMR, we go back to our rules that we've been sort of looking at so far, right? We sort of look at our program design rules here. Let me just pull that up. I know we already have it listed, but it's always nice to see the visual. Well, he said he knows what the rules are. Where did I put him? Hey, there we go. So we're gonna go one set or up to 3 sets, right? With 1 repetition because it's foam rolling, right? And 30 seconds hold on each part. I'm doing anywhere between 1 and 3 body parts. Now, if I were writing this as like homework for my client and I just have them like saying like, hey, wake up in the morning or maybe before you go to bed, do some foam rolling, suddenly I can throw 5 or 6 exercises their way. You know what I mean? Like if it's homework, I'm not burning their session time that they're paying for, which is very valuable to them. I might say like, hey, yeah, spend a little more time on this. But for today, we're just gonna pick these 3. So we're gonna do 1 set today, and then we're gonna go 30 seconds each. So pretty simple approach there. Now, moving on from there, I got to finish my warm up with this client. So I might do one of my favorites is like the kneeling calf, a static kneeling calf stretch. So if you don't know what that is, let's go ahead and pull up a picture of it. So static kneeling calf stretch, one of my, not that one, although that is an awesome video, one of my all-time favorites right here. It's really great because like if you get into this position here, then you really tend to like pin yourself down. So you go kind of like this, you take your opposite hand, pin down that ankle, press on that thigh, and just bring that knee as far forward as you can get it. You have a lot of control to make sure that you're not coming into adduction. Right now, I lost that calf stretch on the outside. So I really can focus and push my knee out. And now I can really target the lateral aspect of the calf there with that stretch. So that's probably one of my favorites. So I'm just going to go ahead. This is something I like to do for my clients. I'm going to go copy image address. We're going to go back over here and we are going to hyperlink it. And now if I send this to my clients in an email, I click that button and it pulls up the picture that I'm looking for. I just try to find, you know, whichever picture. I do this very, very, very quickly, and whichever one is going to give me the most bang for my buck. I'm looking at a lot of these stretches here. Obviously, there's a million, you know, results on friggin' Google, but that is particularly my favorite calf stretch. Obviously, the video I'm going to show you might have some different ones, but static kneeling calf stretch. Now we need an adductor stretch. So I'm going to do a standing adductor stretch. Standing adductor stretch. When you're doing this one, guys, it's fantastic. Like I don't hate horse stance. I think that one's also really good. Although I do think that's a little bit more focused on the inner groin, which isn't as much of a problem for this client. Instead, we're probably going to focus more on like that lateral lunge, classic kind of calf stretch here. Now, a couple little things when you are looking at it. Don't love the fact that she's letting her foot pop up off the ground. So I'm not going to use this picture. That is not my favorite demo right there, right? I think that this is a really nice solid base of support. You can see her knees pointing over her second and third toe. I love that. This leg is nice and straight. Big fan. She's got her toe pointing straight, which I also really like. But I don't love the fact that she's letting her heel pop up. Eric, that is a super awesome question. Can you foam roll the short head of your biceps femoris? Yeah, absolutely. But there's a bit of a mechanics problem. So everybody, question is, what about foam rolling the lateral, the biceps femoris? Absolutely. I'm a huge fan of it actually, but let's go SMR hamstrings. And there's a bit of a mechanics problem here because of the way gravity is pulling and the way like our friggin' knee bends, So when you put it on a foam roller, it's just really, really, really easy to kind of bend that knee. And another kind of thing about like foam rolling, guys, you tend to want to get, either at the origin of the insertion, right? Like we're trying to put pressure on a Golgi tendon organ that lives in the tendon, right? Like, so your tendon for your hamstrings is right behind the back of your knee. So a foam roller, just, you can see here, like it bends the knee, takes a lot of the pressure off, then that muscle's not stretching. Not a huge fan of using a foam roller, but a lacrosse ball, like so, where you can sit on a bench that's at least like thick enough for you to get back there, then you can allow that bend to happen. Now that shortens the hamstring, which obviously generally more foam rolling want to kind of stretch that out. But if you use a lacrosse ball and you actually sit like this, it's a lot easier for you to get right up under that short head of that femoris. And you can even do one of my favorite techniques, which is a little bit more related to like active isolated stretching, but you can do what's called a pin and stretch. So I'll show you a pin and stretch here. You know what? We're gonna have to go video for this one. By the way, if you actually want another really just terrific, absolutely fan-freaking-tastic YouTube channel, the Brookbush Institute here. This guy, Brent Brookbush, he used to be a NASM contributor, actually. And then he went off and he's trying to get his own certification launched. This guy is awesome. I mean, just fantastic. Probably my favorite, like, of all. I love Squat University. Aaron Horschig is also a genius, but like this guy, in my opinion, is the best physical therapist on YouTube. So Brookbush Institute, you want some really terrific stuff. He is a little wordy. You can see there's a 6-minute video for how to do one hamstring technique, but it's great stuff. But what you can do, Eric, if you know that that's like a thing you want to work on,
because what I want.
Sorry. I wanted to mute that. He's going to place that roller in a bent position, and then he's actually going to have her sort of floss the hamstring muscle over the roller internally in her leg. So what she'll do is she'll straighten it, and then obviously that pulls the hamstrings down, and then she'll bring her leg back, and that drags it back over. And so like she's almost getting a little bit of massage sort of internally by pulling it. So it's called a pin and stretch. And so he's pinning it with the foam roller and then stretching over it. If you're going to do that, what you would do is you would say, like, let's say like hamstring pin and stretch. So you'd list it kind of like that. And then you would say like sets, and then under duration, you would say 5 to 10 reps, 1 to 2 second hold each rep. So you'd actually be borrowing, and not 5 to 10. You would tell your client, 10. You'd pick a number, but you would list it as an active stretch. You would list it the same way you would do like a strength level client doing an active isolated stretch. So yeah, that's the hamstring pin and stretch. Fantastic. And actually, because that is somewhat foam roller, we could even keep that in this routine here. And I know that like I'm kind of flexing slightly out of my NASM protocol here, because obviously we're in phase 1. Normally we do static stretches. But yeah, that's actually a really, really, really just terrific stretch. you landed on one of my favorites with that question. So I'll go ahead and we'll take that out of here actually. But so we got the static kneeling calf stretch. We're working our way through. Now we got to get that static adductor. So popping back over to adductor land. Don't love this demo. She's letting her heel pop up, but I love most of it. Don't love this one because she's letting her foot turn out. So can't use that one. So I will say when you're doing this kind of thing, it can be kind of a pain in the butt to find like your, the correct images and things like that. Again, we got a big foot, sort of turn out there, which I'm not a fan of. Also, his knees pointing crazily this way and his toe is pointing straight forward this way. That's a garbage demo. But luckily with cartoons, we can draw someone doing it perfectly. Now I will say, I am much less concerned about what's going on. That's not so bad. I'm much less concerned about what's going on with the leg that you're lunging towards in terms of your foot angle, right? Like in this image, you can kind of see like his toes are pointing straight forward in both versions, right? But if you actually look at this guy, I'll bet his hips pointing more this way. So it's like he's probably getting a little bit of knee flex there. You can turn the foot that you are lunging towards out just a little bit. So here, I'll take it off screen share so you guys can see me a little bit more fully. So if I go here, right? And I want to make sure my toes are both pointing forward for the most part, because what I'm working on here is a frontal plane movement. That's adduction, right? Not a transverse movement where I'm doing rotation. So I'm going to keep both my feet forward, but at the same time, if I'm lunging over one leg, look, my knee's pointing this way now, right? That's going to put stress on my knee joints. That's going to put way too much undue stress. That can cause a lot of problems. So I care a lot less about the angle of this leg that I'm lunging towards. That's not the leg I'm stretching. So I can turn the foot out. What I care about is that this is tracking perfectly, but I don't want to turn this foot out. I don't want to let the foot come up. I don't want to do any of that weird stuff. I want this leg perfectly straight, pointing straight forward like this, because I am trying to get adduction, right? Like I'm trying to stretch the adductor, this is abduction, but I'm trying to stretch the adductor. That's a frontal plane movement. Me turning like this, that actually takes the stretch away from that muscle, which is exactly what I'm trying to avoid. I want to stretch that muscle as much as I can. So it's really important to make sure that I keep that leg straight. Now, what did we say earlier? The adductors also do a little bit of, they do a little bit of hip flexion, right? Not a ton of it, that's mostly hip flexor muscles, but your adductors do a little bit of hip flexion as well in the sagittal plane. So guys, you can try this at home. You've got the time and energy, right? Escape from stuff. So I'm going to go toes pointing straight forward. Now, for me, I need foot turnout. We kind of talked about that for those of you who were there on Thursday. I'm a retrograder, right? So I'm going to turn this foot slightly away, right? And then I want this one to be straight. Now, here's the thing, because they do a little bit of flexion, I need to bring this leg into extension slightly if I want to give it a slightly bigger stretch. So what I like to do is I tell my clients to line the leg that they're stretching. That's gonna be my left in this example. Line up the toes with the heel of your other leg. So it doesn't have to be like way back here, right? It just has to be a slight offset into hip extension. So now this leg's actually behind. Now I can lunge straight out, turn my foot because I need that. If I didn't need that, that's okay. And then this leg can go straight. So I'm actually not perfectly in line here. I'm slightly offset, but I'm keeping this toe pointing straight forward because this is a frontal plane movement. And as I lunge over this leg, that gives me that really deep adductor stretch. So a little bit of hip extension because that muscle wants to do hip flexion, and obviously a lot of abduction. And you can lunge over it. You want to put your arms here? That's totally fine. I like hands on hips because then you get a little leg burn, but we are totally fine with just a little bit. And then we also don't want to end up like this guy. Well, he's doing a seated version, actually. That's fine. Never mind. This is also okay. If you do the seated adductor stretch, which I think there's the ball adductor stretch listed in your textbook, you can go past the knee. That's fine. There's no pressure or gravity on that. So now works just fine. But try just a little bit. Next time you guys do an adductor stretch, try taking the leg that you're stretching just a foot's distance, you know, an ankle's distance. Just take it back ever so slightly into extension. You'll feel a bit of a deeper stretch there.
I have a question about that stretch.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen the kneeling version of it. I've seen it like for
Sure.
the adductor. Is that as effective?
Yeah, that's actually a really great stretch as well. You're talking about like this version here, where like you take it down into this and then this leg comes.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and sometimes they have a yoga block on it, on the extended foot.
Love it. The only thing that I find a little bit problematic, you'll notice, look at me carefully. I didn't take it off screen share, but if you can just pull me up solo. It is kind of natural to bring it forward, kind of like this, which is the opposite of that extension that I just talked about. So if you're going to do this one, I love it. Just make sure, line this back ever so slightly. And that can sometimes cause like a little bit of trapping in the hip. So I don't do it as often, just because I find like the targeting, I'm like, I keep doing all my right. I'm like super loose over here now. And then this leg, just gonna give the rest of this explanation over here in this lunge. So yeah, no, like I like it. I find that it's a little bit trickier for especially new clients. They have a targeting problem with it. So when I'm in a beginner's routine, I generally tend to pick the most like bland, vanilla, simplest to understand, less likely to go wrong homework exercises. But with my clients, I do that one all the time. I think it's great. Like if I'm training them directly, you can totally do that. You can also do kind of another interesting one. Let's see here. Aaron Borchig, adductor kettlebell stretch. I don't know what he calls this, but this one right here is also like incredible. So this is a hip opener. This is much more getting into like if you have groin problems. This is where like I like a horse stance. If I want to get into the groin, I think a horse stance is also a really easy one for people to understand. But you kind of go into a kneeling position here. And you can actually use a kettlebell, which gives you stability because it's pulling you down. So it kind of helps you like actually like have like a good base of support. And then he's just going to use his own like arms with that kettlebell to kind of push his hip externally. So if it is like an adductor like brevis or pectineus problem, which is like right in the freaking groin, or even like the very, very top fibers of the adductor magnus, right, the webbing part, posteriorly, you can actually get a lot out of like this version here and just a little kettlebell opener and just a little like lunge into that. And you'll notice, like try this out later after class today, you'll feel it like up here instead of like the entire thigh. So that's another one. Like if I get a client who's like, I see knees cave in, right? I see knee valgus, and maybe I give them this, lunge stretch, and they're like, yeah, that's fine. And they're like, they're doing what I'm incapable of doing, which is just like this, like, they get way down there, and they're like, fine. Now suddenly I'm going, okay, this is not an adductor longus problem, right? Like this is not going down to the knee. This is probably an adductor problem right at the very top of the hips. So I might use something like this, or your kneeling one would also be a really good one. Options, guys. Lots and lots of exercises out there that are not in your textbook. That's the other thing. When I say I may use a lot of vanilla versions, I also use a lot of vanilla versions with you guys as well. No sprinkles. Very, very, very simple. Just about as simple as it gets that you're going to find from your textbook. So we're going to go with a static, standing, adductor, stretch as it's listed there. But believe you me, there's a lot of other really, really great ones out there as well. So again, just a little link in there in case somebody wants to do it. Lastly, we want to get that static TFL stretch. Right. So we want to go all the way up to the TFL. Why? Well, let's look at the tensor fasciae latae for a second. Right. It is right there at the top of the hip. And it does become our IT band. You can see there's some fibers. Ken Hub always lists this like with the IT band as well. Technically, the TFL is just this portion right here, but there is the iliotibial band there as well. And again, there's a good picture of all that freaking fascia. You know, this group of muscles, they're all just like attached to the, I almost said attached to the hip, which I mean is a turn of phrase, not, I didn't say that. They're all just glued together. Let's think of it that way. But yeah, the TFL portion here. So it's a hip flexor, you know. So we're going to stretch that by doing hip extension, right? So instead of going this way, I'm going to take my leg back. It's also a hip internal rotate, right? So my foot's going this way. That's not helpful. So I'm just going to take that foot out. I'm going to lunge it forward slightly. I'm going to take my arm up and lean. I don't actually have to do this to get a deeper stretch. But again, all that like lateral aspect of fascia there kind of has a bit of a comment. So I find that I get a little bit of a deeper stretch out of it. So we say the static standing TFL stretch. So just a version right there. Let's go with just the, actually, you know what? There's a NASM image directly. And I do actually really like this because it kind of breaks it down for the client, like in steps. Oh, you know what? Although I can't see her foot. Yeah, nope. Gotta pick a different one. If you haven't noticed, by the way, I'm sending this workout out to you guys later today. So that's also why I'm being very specific about these pictures. Come on, interwebs, help me out here. You can see, by the way, here are some other versions. This standing TFL stretch is also very popular. Again, he's got really extreme adduction here because the TFL does a little bit of abduction. It's not great at it though. So I just, this, in my opinion, you'll feel it there a lot because it's like really wrenching on the muscle. But I find that it's not a very effective stretch for actually getting that muscle like turned off, which is what we're looking for. There we go. That's a really tiny image, but at least it's very accurate. All right. So again, these are all static stretches. So one set of all of them, and we're going to go, these are all single-sided exercises as well. So we'll put 30 seconds each. Now, if I want to, I can go through a dynamic full body stretch warm up, you know. So I might take them through, it could be something dynamic like a sun salutation. If I'm a big, like, you know, my client's like a big yoga person, I could put them through like a simple track workout, a bunch of butt kickers, followed by high knees, followed by A skips, you know, something that's like very dynamic, that takes them through like a full body circuit there. But for the most part today, we're just going to take the most simple version. I just might go throw them onto like the treadmill for one set of 5 minutes, right? And then that's a really good opportunity for me to review with them any of like what's been going on with them nutritionally, how their workouts are feeling, are they getting recovered, right? What's their sleep schedule looking like? You know, is this affecting anything? It's a good chance for me to just kind of check in. My client hasn't done that. If they already did maybe 5 minutes on the treadmill, like when they walked into the door, my appointment's at 8:30, they got here at 8:25 and they went and did the treadmill first. Well, I can totally just axe that. But this is a pretty decent little warm up there. There's also a pretty good little homework bit for my client if they've got that pes plana syndrome. So now we've addressed, you know, half of our problem here. So now all we have to do is we got to switch to the other half of our problem, right? We've looked at 50% of this equation now, the tight stuff. So let's get to the other side and do the weak stuff. But I'm already behind today. Let's give you guys 10 and we'll come back and keep moving through this. So 9:44 right now, guys. I'll see you at 9:54. We'll be back on and that'll give me a chance to go get a water because I was coming in a rush today. Okay. So let's get back into this, shall we? So like I said, we've addressed half of the equation so far, right? We looked at the excessive adduction. We looked at the internal rotation, right? We looked at the foot pronation, all the things that are often sort of created by tight muscles. We also have to remember that like this is allowed to move this. Whoop. I trapped my cat in here. Sorry. Yeah, nope, no whining. Scoop. Sorry, everybody. That was Bumble. Yeah, guest appearance today. um so yeah, we have to remember that like while there is definitely a tight muscle that is actively pulling us out of alignment, we also have a weak muscle that is allowing that pull to happen because maybe it's just underused, maybe it is poor mechanics that somebody has like neurologically, they just didn't know how to move properly. So now we have to sort of look at these antagonist muscles, right? For how we can sort of address the other part of this problem. So if we need more foot supination, right, we can actually actively sort of turn on muscles like our medial gastrocnemius, right? So that's actually the other part of our calf. We can get a little bit there. And then we're going to see a huge emphasis here. We go back to our underactive list on the anterior and the posterior tibialis. Posterior tibialis in particular is just going to be a terrific exercise for us. So we're going to see medial gastrocnemius, anterior tibialis, and posterior tibialis. Both of those are going to be fantastic. So for our movement prep exercises, we might be doing something that involves like a little bit of balance. So really just very crazily simple way to get these muscles turned on is just to pull your toes up towards your face while you're balancing, right? How many times do you guys see people standing on one leg and they got that like noodle foot, or they do like a step up to balance. They just let that foot kind of hang naturally like a dead fish, right? Just actively, all you got to do to get a little bit of activation in that anterior tibialis is just pull those toes up towards you, like try to bring that up. And that's instantly, just place your hand right here. You can literally feel that anterior tibialis firing directly on the front of the shin there. In terms of tibial internal rotation, again, we see like that biceps femoris, that's our lateral hamstring. So we're going to put more emphasis on the medial hamstring, right? Something that's going to activate the inner portions of our thighs. Pretty easy to do. You can put a physio ball between the knees, get a little squeezing action in there while you're doing something that also activates the hamstrings, like a floor bridge. Then we need a little bit more abduction here. So we're going to see a huge emphasis on that gluteus maximus and that gluteus medius. Both of those are absolutely huge muscles that we want to work on here, right? Not only is the gluteus medius working directly into abduction, right, but the gluteus maximus is working external rotations directly. Could not be more opposite of the TFL. So we're going to see the gluteus maximus for our hip external rotation. And we're going to see the gluteus medius for our hip abduction, right? So big emphasis on, in particular, like those muscles there. So we go and we need to look at some like, what are some good exercises in our activation circuit to make sure that like, at the core, the right muscles are sort of turned on and our foot's sort of turned on before we get into like our main workout. Well, one thing that you can do if you want to really just focus on ankles in particular, this is another example of like something I would give my clients as homework, more so than something I would do in every single like individual training session. But you can do resisted dorsiflexion. And you can do resisted ankle inversion, right? Both of those things can be done with a TheraBand. Like I said, this does not feel much like an actual workout to your clients. So I'll oftentimes teach my clients this. I'll do it with them for a few sessions. And then after that, I, get them to sort of do this as homework, just because it doesn't burn very many calories. And you can go ahead and see why here. So here's our resisted dorsiflexion. Really simple exercise here. She's gonna say, I do not like this tempo, by the way, but you can see, right? It's she's contracting really well, right? She's just working directly in to those toe pulls, right? And then ankle inversion, another really good one. We're just gonna place that band off to the side, and she's gonna actively scoop the inside of the foot directly in, like towards the midline there. True story, like these are exercises that are really, really easy to do, at home. There's other versions as well. You can do like a wall dorsiflexion. We call these like toe pulls. So very, very just the most simple exercise out there. Literally can just kind of lean against a wall, which I actually can't do against that. But so I can go here. My feet come out ever so slightly. And then what you guys can't see me do is all I'm going to do is just pull my toes up. The further I take my foot out away from the wall, the harder that's going to get because I'll have more gravity pushing down. But literally just as simple as it gets. A little bit of dorsiflexion there, That's a little bit more dynamic of an exercise. So we're a big fan of that one. That's a really good one as well. I think it doesn't necessarily address that posterior tibialis very well. I want to get that ankle inversion scooping action going. But both of those are just fantastic. So we're going to go ahead and we'll sort of link those in there. Resisted dorsiflexion. Right here. Copy that. And we'll link it. And then resisted inversion. Actually, there. And I'll give this, this is also another pro tip for you guys. Anybody in here, just pick up, head over to Amazon or, get it at a physio store. Just get yourself a TheraBand roll. Just so you can buy, it's $30, scissors, you cut it off, give it to your client and be like, homework, toe pulls, toe inversions, and just give that to your clients. It is a really, 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 really easy, very terrific thing that you can sort of work on there. So those are a little bit less dynamic, a little bit less fun. So now we also want to sort of address something that's going to be a little bit more, gluteus maximus oriented, right? And a little bit of gluteus medius. Let's go. One really good one could be like a plank with alternating leg raises. Okay. And this is not in your textbook, but it is one of my all-time favorite core exercises. Sometimes people call this the marching plank. But you can get yourself into a plank position. Now, you got to ask yourself, like, is this appropriate for a client in the stabilization level? Well, I'm looking at this. I don't see excessive spinal or hip movement here, right? A little bit of glute movement, but for the most part, I don't consider that to be like super excessive, right? I could also very much do like a side lying hip abduction, right? Or a side plank with hip abduction is also a really good one. So side lying hip abduction would be this version where I'm on the ground, but there's not a lot of core activation there. So I'm not exactly, getting the most bang for my buck here, So instead, I might go with a side plank with hip abduction. And now suddenly, I've got a much better, I can do this modified on the knees, like we see in the video here. Now, the reason this is like such a freaking great gluteus exercise is because you're working both glutes simultaneously, guys. Like this one down here has to isometrically stabilize to hold you up. And then this one right here is obviously doing like concentric and eccentric contraction. You want to make that harder? You can absolutely take that up fully onto like one leg and go with this version here. I will say don't do, she did it in the first rep. Well, that's not too bad, but don't point your toe up. It's a big mistake that a lot of people make. Then the only thing you're doing is working that hip flexor again, right? Because you're just doing hip flexion. So just make sure that your toes are pointing forward if you do that one. I'm probably only going to pick one of those, because I also want to get some balance work in there. So I'm going to go with that plank with the alternating leg raises. That's a little bit more gluteus maximus oriented. Now, if I want to get a little bit more balance and work in there, I'm going to go with the single leg balance with reach. This is directly from your textbook. This is probably NASM's like all-time favorite balance exercise here, but this is the multi-planar version. Oh gosh, man, I used to be able to show these NASM videos and like they didn't monetize their freaking channel, and so there were no ads. And now, so she's here standing on one leg. She's going to go sagittal, frontal, and transverse. Just a really great exercise to get those glutes turned on. I will say, if the hip flexors are a problem, I don't know why we would do a sagittal version, because that's just going to make that flexion problem a little worse. So for me, I like the single leg balance with reach, but in the coaching tips, I will say hip abduction and external rotation. So I'll have my client primarily focus hands on the hips, and rather than doing all three, right, I'm just going to have them go here to here, right? And then it's just abduction. And again, I'm making sure my toe is pointing slightly, slightly inwards, but really forward, so that like I'm primarily focused on that abduction. And then external rotation, the foot swings away, but I'm not opening up my hip, right? I'm keeping my hip square, and I'm just going back behind it. You can really feel that, by the way, if you just place your hand on the side of your hip. You'll really feel a good squeeze and contraction there. So we're going to go with single leg balance reach. Just a terrific exercise, top of my list in terms of getting the glutes turned on. And there we go. So I'm going to link that for our clients. It does just say, little coaching tip in there that's going to make sure you do the right version of that. I'll throw that plank with the leg raise in there. That one's 30 seconds, so that's probably a good demo. Oh, I love that. Yeah, she's doing a great job of like not doing too much. Oh no, but that's a single arm plank. That's a single leg plank. We just want where was that video I showed last time? Sweet. All right, so now I got a pretty good workout here, but again, I got to make sure I pick the right numbers. So I go back over to here. For my core, that should be 1 to 3 sets of 12 to 20 reps with 0 to 90 seconds of rest. So I go back here. Let's have this client, we're going to say, 2 sets of everything. This is just a nice gentle warm up, very dynamic to kind of get them into sort of a resistance section later. Here, let's go with like 15 reps each on both of those. Alternating leg raise, we'll go 8 each because that's a total of 15. Because they're still planking the whole time, right? Like, that's one thing that gets a little confusing about your reps and sets and stuff. If any of you guys have wondered, like when you're picking reps, like should you do like 15 each, or should you just try to get to be around 15 total? Here's how to think about it, right? So let's say I'm doing a single arm shoulder or a single leg shoulder press, right? So I'm standing up on one leg. I got dumbbells here, right? I don't need to do 15 on this leg and then 15 more on this leg for a total of, because that's 30 shoulder presses, and this is primarily a shoulder exercise. But if I were doing one dumbbell, right, yeah, I would do 15 on the left arm, and then I would switch and go here, and I would do 15 on my left, right? So I think I said left twice. 15 on my right and 15 on my left. So we would, it depends on like what you're primarily working. In this case, the focus is the abs. The leg raise is just there to get a little bit of like glute activation. They're still planking the entire time. You know what I mean? So I did 15 each on that. They're going to be in that plank for about 60 seconds, which for the record, if my client can handle it, awesome, you know. But also as like a trainer, once I get any of my clients to 3 sets of like 60 seconds on the plank, once they can do that with just 60 seconds of if I can get a client to do 3 sets of 60 seconds on a plank with only 30 seconds of rest between each set, I'm done planking with them. You know what I mean? Like at that point, I'm moving on to something like a hollow rock or, you know, a much more advanced, a plank with their arm on something that makes it very unstable, you know? So that's my take on that. Same thing is going to be true here on our balance. You know, we are still balancing on the opposite leg, so it's getting a lot of work. Yes, I'm swinging with my other leg, but the balanced leg is going to be burning that entire time. So I'm also going to go with 8 each there. And then if you do need to leave your client a coaching tip, but this should be something that you just address, you can see hip abduction and external rotation. I'll make that a little bit more clear by just saying equals 1 rep. So when they do both, that's 1 rep, not, you know, 1, 2, 3. You know what I mean? Tempo for all of these should be nice and slow. So there's my rules. And for my clients, generally, if I'm doing movement prep, I'm trying to move through this pretty quickly and get right into sort of the meat and potatoes of the workout. So I'm going to perform this as a circuit, 0 seconds of rest. You do not have to do this every time. I know like 90% of my example programs are always like 0 seconds of rest and like do it as a circuit. That's just because as you know, through experience with my clients, like they're usually really eager to get into like the workout proper. So I usually do these in circuits. And then I could even say 0 seconds all the way down, you know, but I will give them, we'll be more reasonable than that today. We'll say 60 seconds for rest. And there we go. The rest of this, it can be whatever I want it to be, right? This is stabilization. I could do a ball squat. I could do a walking lunge with balance. I could do Bulgarian split squats. Right? I could get into, you know, a stability ball, hamstring curl, and then maybe I get into oh, I didn't put the squat down there. That's honestly ball squat or Bosu ball, you know, Bosu squats, right? I can get into my traditional workout, but that's really not even our focus today. Really, I just want to I went full Irish there. I just want to take a look at our warm-up and movement prep. How do we address those overactive and underactive muscles? So questions, comments, concerns. I've been talking over you guys forever now. I haven't given you time to get a word in edgewise. Do you have any questions about how we picked these routines? Why these are the exercises we went with? What other exercises could we possibly do? You know, what questions have you got for me? How you guys feeling?
I feel like so far everything makes sense. I also believe that the exercises are kind of endless. Like we could do so many variations. So I think the more that we're learning about the proper terms and techniques for each exercise, it's starting to click in for me anyway. I'm thinking, okay, all of the things, and that's what I'm writing notes on. All of the different exercises that could go along with the TFL. Now I've got a list instead of just looking at it right here. We're writing 1 or 2 things down. It's endless. So
yeah. There's tons of them out there. Really, what you want to, this is why I don't like to tell people to just memorize the freaking exercises that are in your book by category. You can totally pass your test that way. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Absolutely. It's not hard to be like, all right, well, that one was under the stabilization list. So that's the, you know, because they'll say like, you get a test question that's like, which of the following exercises would be most appropriate for a client in the strength endurance phase? And then, they're going to have 4 exercises listed. You know what I mean? They'll all be power exercises, except one of them will be a strength exercise. And it'll all be textbook examples. They won't give you any random exercises, kind of like the ones that are sort of outside your textbook. It'll only be directly from your book, So you could totally do that. You could totally just memorize, be like, well, that one fell under the strength level. Those 3 fell under the power level. So I know that's not the right answer because I've got my 4 suits of cards memorized, like playing solitaire, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's, instead of that, what I like people to know, and I think is much, much, much better, because then you can pull things off the internet. You can pull things from your friends and family or whoever you're working with. You can invent exercises if you want to. We want to pay attention to our defining characteristics here. What makes a static stretch different from an active stretch is how long you hold it. Static stretches are held for 30 seconds. Active stretches are only held for 1 to 2 seconds. What makes resisted dorsiflexion a good exercise for the stabilization level is it's something that's really just kind of focused on one singular joint. It is doing one thing. And because it's a resistance band, it's pretty wobbly. So it's a slightly more unstable variation. I love those heel raises I showed you earlier, but I would actually probably use that more for like a strength level client because I can modify that and make it heavier by moving their legs out. So while I think it's a great exercise, I wouldn't put it in this style of a routine. Or like what makes the plank with an alternating leg raise the perfect ab exercise here is that it's not moving the spine. That's our defining characteristic in the stabilization levels. That's core, yes, but particularly core that doesn't move the spine too much. Now, let's take this same client, because Jennifer, that's a really good point, right? Let's look at this way more exercise here. So I'm going to erase these, but I'm going to come back to it because the one I want to send you today is a stabilization routine. So I'm going to erase all this and then I'll just undo it in just a second. But let's say this client moves up a month, right? And they're in phase, we'll say phase 3. We move them into hypertrophy next, right? Or muscular development next. So all this static stuff instantly becomes an active kneeling calf stretch. It becomes an active standing adductor stretch and an active standing TFL stretch. Right, so now maybe I'll do 2 sets of everything because I'm supposed to pick somewhere between 1 and 2 if you guys look at your rules. And then I'm gonna do, I will say it says duration here, but I like to list the reps. I'm gonna say 8 reps each and just kind of copy that for all of these. And in my coaching tip, that's where I'll put 1 to 2 second hold each rep. Foam rolling can stay totally the same. Remember, the client's got the same tight muscles here. Now I'm just going to use slightly different techniques, right? My active calf stretch is going to look, instead of just like getting in there and kind of just like pushing in and like holding for 30 seconds, now I'm going to bring that back. And I'm really going to kind of focus, I'm almost more focused on my toe pull. I really try to like pull my toe back while I'm bringing that knee as far forward, hold it 1 to 2, let the tension off, and go back into it. And I can even take a kettlebell and push down on that, and that can give me a little more gravity and really give me like a stronger push there. My adductor stretch, remember the hip opener we talked about with the kettlebell here, right? I could really push into that, right? And get more into the groin if I wanted to, right? But I can go 1, 2, and I can come out of that. 1, 2, and then I can come out of that, right? So I'm just going into active variations. Like you said, you got a big list, right? I got a big variation for this moving into a new client. Now I can get way more dynamic about all these exercises here, right? I can go with maybe 2 core exercises and 2 balance exercises as a quick little circuit here, really get my client's heart rate up, let them calm down, then I can explain what we're doing for the true workout today. So maybe something like a step up to balance, right? Which is this exercise right here. It's your classic step up, except you're going to come up to 1 leg. That guy's still planking. I could even do a step up curl to press overhead balance, you know. But again, look, she's pulling her toe up. So I can put that in my coaching tip, right? So I'm not going to do this variation of a step up to balance where I just let that dead fish foot, you know. I'm really going to focus on, let's see if she does it right. This is a GIF. Nope. I'm really going to focus on like that toe pull, you know. So step up to balance is a great balance exercise for this particular client. And then maybe I go into something a little bit more dynamic. I don't necessarily have to directly address, you know, only the muscles at a time. Maybe my client wants just some traditional core work. Great. Stability ball crunches. Is that doing anything for their pes planus? No. Still a great exercise though, you know. And I'm just trying to get everything turned on before we get into the main workout. So a little bit of legs, go back to the core for some crunches. Let's go into a walking lunge, or no, let's go with a lateral lunge to balance, right? So now I'm actually going to make my client use their lateral glute a little bit more and then come up and balance, right? So they got a kettlebell, they got a dumbbell in hand, right? Something where they're using their abductors, right? Big abduction movement here. And then coming right back into a little bit more balance work. I got my crunches in there. Maybe I want to get a little bit, maybe I want a little bit for the backside. So maybe I'll go with like a back extension, right? And then because the back extension is risky for doing it the wrong way, let's take a look at that actually. We're going to put this on the Roman chair examples here. Instantly, right out the gate, I see a picture that I freaking hate. Not only because she's twisted. I don't know why you're modeling, looking at the camera, but look at those feet, right? Number one, they're dorsiflexed, or they're plantar flexed, which actually that's not really that big a deal, but her toes are pointed away, which means she is doing tibial external rotation, which means if she's doing her back extensions like this, she's working on her freaking biceps femoris short head, the devil's muscle, you know. Like, so I hate. That's one of those form things that drives me up a wall. You see people doing, no, I can't tell. You see people doing back extensions. Also, I hate this. That's hyperextension. We do not need that. But you see people like let their foot turn out. So I might even give my client like a small little coaching tip here, foot turn out. I might give them like a small little coaching tip. Can't tell that one. That says like right over here, like, hey, slight point toes towards each other very slightly. Right. I don't mean like I want them like this, right? But just the tiniest angle there. And that's going to primarily put, when they're doing their back extension, yes, it's a core exercise for their rectus spinae and stuff. But it's going to put just a little bit of emphasis on that medial hamstring that we want to work on. And so 2 sets. Now, obviously, this is strength level, so I got to change my numbers here. Let's go with 10 each. Let's go with 10 there. Make that nice and heavy. 10 each, and we'll go with 10 there. And now all of this is a medium tempo instead. And I can still do this as a circuit, right? So same client, but to your point, Jennifer, totally different list of exercises, right? Tons of ways to skin a workout, you know? I'm a cat lover, so we're definitely not using the other phrase. So yeah, there's our workout. And I actually really like the symmetry of this too. I like the 10 each, 10, 10 each, 10. I think that's going to be easy for my client. Because I could totally, by the way, really move my numbers around like crazy, anywhere from 8 to 12. But just easy to remember numbers. Trust me, that'll make your life a lot easier because people forget. Or people get confused, you know. You got to remember your client's not an expert of interpreting this stuff, you know. All right. Any questions before we move into our next postural distortion? How are we feeling about pes planus syndrome, guys? Pretty good? And we're feeling pretty good about like, how to kind of take something off a list and throw it into a workout. We're feeling good about those two aspects of things. Sweet. I will take it. Let me do a whole bunch of Control Z. Get this back to neutral here. Slowly. There we go. All right, I'm gonna save this and then I'll send this out to you later. Pest Planus Stabilization. All right, let's go back to a blank one here and do the exact same thing. So, moving forward here, let's take a look at our next sort of very common postural distortion, the lower crossed syndrome, aka the excessive anterior pelvic tilt. So, we take a look here, man. It's very, I don't know why, but it is very common. Like most example versions of this, like the person faces the other way. This is going to freak me out a little bit. So we take a look here. There's our pronation distortion. So I'm just going to go ahead and move this over here. Or did I say pronation distortion? Sorry, lower cross. There's our lower cross syndrome. So why do we call it lower cross syndrome? Well, we look at like what's happening here. Like imagine your pelvis, right? Is kind of like a steering wheel, and that steering wheel is just anteriorly rotated. So from the center right there, basically what we're seeing way too much of is rotation in this direction and rotation in that direction. So we are seeing overactive and underactive again. I know I already kind of went through this with you guys on Thursday, but just tying this to, more of our sort of practical examples here. So really what's going on here? Let's take a look. Let's go back to our NASM list here, right? Again, overactive hip flexors, right? Now I say hip flexors, that's pretty friggin' broad. There's a complex of muscles. This is a big group of muscles here, right? But generally, there's some key bad guy players here that are really, really tight. What was that? Oh, that's all right. So we take a look here. I'm always just scrounging the internet for the right images. Oh, I hate it when their websites are like this. The image is like part of the website, so I can't pull it separately. One more try. Success. Okay, so we're seeing a pretty good group of muscles here, right? Key player that we are definitely going to see here is going to be that rectus femoris. Now, that is a quadriceps muscle as well. It's in charge of knee extension, but one of its main jobs is definitely hip flexion. So as we're sort of looking at that, we know that that's a really big one. That's going to run from the ASIS all the way down on top of the tibia there. And so rectus femoris, one of our big key players here in terms of like tight muscles, right? Running all the way down. They kind of got some other quadriceps highlighted here, but running all the way down right there onto the tibia, right? Now, in addition to that, we are also very much still seeing our iliopsoas, which is the term NASM uses. That's sort of the combined action of this iliacus muscle right here that lives along the inside ridge of our pelvis, coming down, grabbing the hip, and the psoas, right? So our psoas right here, grabbing each of these individual vertebrae. So iliopsoas, they kind of share an insertion. So they often get listed as like one muscle. So go back over here. We're going to list those two out. Oops. Out of here. We're going to list those two out for sure. So tight muscles we've got. We're going to see hip flexor complex. And then I'm just going to go underneath here and be a little bit more specific. We're going to see the rectus femoris. Just making sure I'm keeping my, oh, you know what? Sorry. What I'm supposed to be writing in red is excessive hip flexion. Sorry, that's how I'm doing this. So we're seeing excessive hip flexion there. I want to change my format halfway through here. And we're also seeing excessive lumbar lordosis or excessive spinal extension. So those are our two things. So what we're not seeing enough of is exactly the opposite of that. What's our opposite of hip flexion? Well, it's going to be hip extension. So we need more of that. We're seeing excessive hip flexion now, or spinal extension. Now, I will say this, a lot of people jump straight to, oh, so I need more spinal flexion, right? I would argue against that, right? You can even see, we go back and we see, it says abdominals. It says abdominals as the underactive muscle here. I don't love that. That's another thing that I think NASM is being a little too non-specific here, because abdominals makes you think like you can do crunches to fix this problem. And if you're bracing properly and like you're doing your crunches just right, there's an argument to be made that that is very helpful and can have a positive benefit. But it's like one of the issues is like you're fixing movement with more movement. You know what I mean? Like, you know, when you're losing, you know, I think of the last time you guys were like sort of losing your balance, right? You see somebody trying to stand on one leg and they just start doing this kind of thing. And it's just like, it's like, dude, just reset, come back up. Like, you know, like you're trying to fix movement with more movement, you know? So I don't love just listing abdominals because that makes people think, oh, I'm going to work on my six pack and that'll make this problem go away. I'm going to fix my excessive extension by doing more flexion. Instead, I am going to say what we have a lack of. Instead of spinal extension, instead of writing spinal flexion, we're going to write spinal stabilization. Now, spinal stabilization is your abdominal. So we're not saying NASM's like fully wrong here. We're just going to put more emphasis on the stabilizer muscles of the spine rather than the flexor muscles of the spine. We're just going to take a slightly more advanced look at this problem. So going back to our tight muscles, I said for excessive hip flexion, that is going to be your hip flexor complex, right? So that's what's tight here. Now, in particular, which muscles do I mean? Rectus femoris, iliopsoas, right? That's the iliacus and the psoas. And really, the tensor fascia latae. There's our TFL again. Friggin' TFL muscle. This is a pretty good working list. There's an argument to be made for all those adductors we talked about earlier. You know, that adductor group does do a little bit of hip flexion. There's an argument to be made for your sartorius. You know, yeah, it's a hip flexors. Even even your gracilis a little bit. But in my personal experience and the experience of most people who do this for a living, right? It's really like those are our big three. These are really kind of our most common sort of like overactive hip flexors that we really kind of need to work on here, right? So those are the ones we're going to try to loosen up. Now, for spinal extension, that's much easier. Our spinal extensors, erector spinae, erector spinae, right? Very, 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 very tight here. Again, these are low back muscles trying to do stabilization, but that's not really their job. I mean, look, these muscles are responsible for flexing your back like this, right? So if somebody is like, having that moment where something happens and they tighten up their core, right? they might actually kind of go like this. They might actually have like this big sort of flexing action happen there, right? Because like this is a muscle that's like, oh, I need to brace for impact. It's not really designed to be that great at just like stabilization. It's really good at extension. It's really good at movement, you know? So that's the thing here, right? We're using a mover instead of using a stabilizer. So there we go. We've got erectus. No. Retype that real quick. Erector spinae. Now, muscles we need to work on. Let's go back to our list, right? So we got our lumbar extensors, we're tight. We got our hip flexors, we're tight. Well, we need our hip extensors to work opposite of that. So opposite of the hip flexor complex, you know, our hip extensor complex, but that's nobody calls that. Gluteus maximus, probably the biggest one. Gluteus medius, that's pretty helpful. You know, it's got a little bit of weak extension movement. That's why it's up there. And then we're actually going to see the hamstrings here. Those guys that were a little overactive in our last list, well, they're actually pretty helpful at working on that hip extension. Now, I will say your hamstrings are a synergist for hip extension. They should not be doing most of the work. So while I love floor bridges for fixing an anterior pelvic tilt, you got to take a second to ask your client when they're doing that floor bridge, and we'll get into those exercises in just a second, but when they're doing this, right, if you don't know what that is, here it is. Do you feel that in your hamstrings or do you feel it in your glutes? If I'm targeting the hamstrings, great, but I don't want you to only feel it in your hamstrings. This is primarily a glute exercise, right? It's hip extension. So gluteus maximus, gluteus medius, and hamstrings are all going to be really good. And then for spinal stabilization, this is another kind of big list here, but we are going to be our core stabilizers, right? Or core stabilization system, if you want to say that. This is listed in your textbook as also a very large list. That's going to be your transverse abdominis or TVA. This is going to be your internal obliques instead of your external obliques. Now it's going to get a little weird. Your multifidus, which you might think is a synergist to your erector spinae, and you'd be right. Like, I mean, they both live in the low back there, but the multifidus is more in charge of stabilization. And then we're going to see pelvic floor muscles, and even our diaphragm, which generally when we think diaphragm, we think, well, isn't it in charge of my breathing? Yep, totally is. But in this case, we're actually using it for abdominal pressure. So you think about like all the muscles in that core stabilization system, it's a box, right? If I were trying to, like, if we're going to have game night together, right, and I decide to bring Jenga, I want to make sure that those Jenga blocks can move as one solid unit. So I'm going to keep all those blocks in a box rather than just like try to gather them all up in my arms and just randomly carry them to your house, right? They're going to be falling out. I have to pick them up and then the next one's going to fall out. You know, it's like that video. You guys remember this video of this kid picking up ice cubes? This is like my favorite internet video for years. Where should it go? Oh man, come on. I'm not gonna find it. It's supposed to be a fast example. I'm supposed to just pull that up while I continue talking. All right. Anyway, it's a great video. He's got like a little, you know, he's a little toddler. He's got like a cup of ice and he like bends down and like one of the ice cubes falls out. So he goes to pick it up and another one falls out. And he like puts it back in. So then he like picks it down again and like another one falls out. And he's stuck in this like cycle, you know, like, because he just keeps bending over. It's the cutest video on the planet. That's kind of what like trying to fix your freaking core is like, though. You know, like when somebody has an anterior pelvic tilt, that's what fixing it with crunches is like. Because you're only working on that rectus abdominis, which that's your outer shelf, and yeah, that's your six pack, that's the one we all want to show off at the beach and stuff. But the transverse abdominis is the one that creates spinal stability. So I want you to think of your core as like a box, right? Your transverse abdominis pushes back and creates stability there. Your multifidus pushes forward and creates stability there. Your internal obliques are the sides of the box pushing in like this, creating stability there. Your diaphragm and your diaphragm and your pelvic floor pushes up, diaphragm pushes down. And so you're creating stability on all six sides of that cube. And that's what keeps your discs from randomly sliding around and herniating. So I'm less concerned about your ability to crunch a big amount of weight on that spine, that crunch machine at the gym. What I care way more about is your ability to hold your discs in place. So potential muscles that are really tight, hip flexor complex here, particularly these three, and the erector spinae, they're pulling too hard. And then what we need to work on is, rather than spinal extension, we want to work on our spinal stabilizers to hold our spine in place. And we want to work on our hip extensors to pull back on that pelvis and get it turned back to neutral. Because if we can do that, we will restore that posture. And we call this lower cross syndrome because, as you can see, it creates an X in terms of what is loose and what is tight. Questions, comments, concerns about that before we do our next break? How y'all feeling? I love it. I love it. I'll take it. You take 10. We'll be back from 10:40. We'll be back 10:50. Okay. Back into it. So let's go ahead and I got a good video for this one as well. Let's take a look at anterior pelvic press. Actually, hold on. That's the wrong one. That one.
We're going to design a movement prep program based specifically off of your client's overhead squat assessment. So here, from a lateral view, we're looking at the anterior pelvic tilt. So as we squat, the client should be able to hold their hips in a neutral position. So initially, we'll look at aligning them up at their 5 kinetic chain checkpoints. So the feet are going to be straight, knees are in proper alignment, and we'll get her in a neutral position here with her hips. So take and put your hands here on your hips, and what I want you to do is arch your back as far as you can, and then round as far as you can, and now go somewhere in the middle. Now that is Claire's neutral position of the spine. We want to be sure she maintains that throughout this squat. So now let's reach both hands overhead, all the way overhead. There we go. Now we're going to perform 3 to 5 squats down to the height of about a normal chair. So as soon as you're ready, go ahead and lower into the squat. And what we immediately see, go ahead and come back up. So we'll just keep a continuous motion here. We immediately see she's not able to maintain that neutral position. Go ahead and relax. So we'll move right into our program. For the anterior pelvic tilt, we know we need to begin by foam rolling the quads, and then we'll move on to the piriformis. So we'll grab our foam roller. Let's come down into a prone position. We'll position this, we'll position it here. Now go ahead and lay across, so elbows are going to be on the ground. We'll position the leg in the center of the foam roller with the foam roller right there at the top of the leg. Opposite leg here is going to be out to the shape of a number 4. As we're rolling, be sure we maintain a neutral position here with the spine and maintain a neutral position here with their head. So remember to roll nice and slow, about 1 inch per second. We're going to slowly work the shoulders and elbows up as well until you find a tender spot. So whatever you identify as a tender spot, that's where you're going to stop and hold. As you're here, be sure you breathe, try to relax the muscle, and we're going to hold for 20 to 30 seconds or until that pain starts to reduce. After that time, you're going to switch and perform on the other leg. Here, we're going to move on to our piriformis. So with the roller positioned here on the mat, we're going to take a seat. She's positioning her left side hip on the center of the roller. Therefore, her left hand's going to be flat on the ground, left leg's going to cross over the right, and then this right arm's going to come across to stabilize the knee. Now with our piriformis, this is not a big rolling motion. So slowly start to roll your body down until you identify that tender spot. When you find it, stop and hold. Now here you're going to breathe, big deep breaths in for 20 to 30 seconds or until that pain starts to reduce. As soon as we're done there, you would repeat on the other side. Now we're going to move on to our half kneeling quad stretch. We'll get this out of the way. So come into a half kneeling position. The quad to be stretched will be on the knee that's down. So here, put your hands on your hips. We're going to go into that posterior pelvic tilt position. So she's activating the left glute, and then slowly start to bring your hips forward until you feel the first bit of tension there in the hip. As soon as you feel that tension, you're going to hold for 30 seconds. Now remember, in a static stretch, it should not be painful. There may be mild discomfort. Make sure there's no arching of the low back. And again, you would hold that for 30 seconds. When the time's up, you would repeat that on the other side. We're going to move on now to our core stabilization section. With the arch in the low back, we know that the glutes are underactive. So what we'll begin with here is a quadruped opposite arm and leg raise. So come down to your hands and knees. You're going to position the hands right underneath the shoulders, and the knees are going to be right underneath the hips. Throughout this exercise, let's make sure you maintain a neutral position here with the spine. Be sure the head doesn't start to fall forward, and we're going to extend the leg all the way out. So she's going to reach there, point the toe. So notice we have triple extension, contract the quads, contract the glutes, draw in here ever so slightly. Thumb is going to be up. We would hold there for 2, and now we're going to lower for 4. So down for 4, 3, 2, 1. We'll engage here slightly, and let's extend again. Extend nice and slow to right there. There we go. Thumb up. Everything's extended, stabilize. Now lower for 3, 2, 1. And again, we'll extend, no motion here. There we go, perfect. Squeeze the glute, squeeze the quad, squeeze the calf, thumbs up and lower down for 4, 3, 2, 1. Now you would repeat that from 12 to 20 times. Now we're going to go ahead and progress on, and we're going to move into our prone plank. So here, prone position, elbows are going to be down. Position the elbows just below the shoulders. 5 kinetic chain checkpoints, so feet, knees, and alignment. Here, contract the quadriceps, squeeze the glutes. You have to be sure you engage those core muscles. Draw in here, and notice this position here with her shoulders, nice protracted position. That's great for shoulder girdle stability. And notice the neutral position here with her head. We would hold that for 20 to 30 seconds, and then we would go ahead and move on. Next in our template is moving on to the balance, so we'll go ahead and stand. In our balance stabilization, our focus is on that stance leg. We're going to ask Claire to put her hands on her hips. 5 kinetic chain checkpoints, so the feet are nice and straight. The knees are in alignment, neutral position with the hips. She's going to shift her weight to that left leg. She'll be nice and stable there. Now what we're going to do is shift her center of gravity by having her reach out with this right leg. As soon as she does that, that's going to load up that left side glute. Now bring the leg back in, nice and stable. Reach out again. So remember, our focus here is on the stance leg. This leg here is just slowly moving out, and bring it back in. There we go. Let's do one more. Reach out. And if you lose your balance, feel free to tap the toe. Last one here. Bring it back in. Perfect. You would repeat 8 to 10 reps on each side. Now again, following our OPT model, we're going to move to our reactive stabilization. Our goal here is to optimize landing mechanics. So let's begin with those feet approximately hip width apart. Toes are pointed straight ahead. Knees are in alignment. Neutral position here. And we will go ahead and load by coming into a squat and jump and land. So we'll hold for 3 to 5 seconds. Use this time to realign the body. So the feet are straight, knees are in alignment, and jump. Good. Hold for 3, 2, 1, and jump. Each time you land, you're going to fix the feet, fix the knees. We'll do one more and jump. Hold for 3, 2, 1, and you can relax. You would repeat that 8 to 10 times. After you complete that reactive stabilization, you can go back through all that again for 1 to 3 times total, or you can go ahead and move right on to your resistance training.
All right. So there's sort of the textbook approach, right? Again, like he's primarily focused there on like spinal stability and extension of the glutes. That's why like a bird dog is going to be a really great exercise there. But let's get a little bit more creative with it, shall we? Get some different exercises listed here. So again, our client's goal this time, a little bit different from last time. We're going to say correct anterior pelvic tilt or low back arch. We're going to put this client in phase 1 as well. Again, that is sort of our most corrective based phase here. So we take a look at our list. Really, we've got a little bit less to work on here, right? This is a little more simple. We just have to focus on our hip flexors and our lumbar extensors. So we're going to go with a little bit of SMR for the hip flexors. Now, when I say that, my clients know what I mean. Because generally when people think of the hip flexors, they think just straight up at the front of the hip. What I really am kind of talking about there is like the origin for that rectus femoris, so like right under the ASIS there. And then our TFL is going to be a really big one here. And then I'm going to put the erector spinae. Now, similarly to sort of what Eric was talking about earlier, do we want to use a foam roller on our erector spinae? Are we just going to kind of get in there with like a foam roller? Here's the thing. I do not know anybody who's ever gotten hurt doing this. But it's one of those things where, like, number one, these muscles lay on the inside ridge of those like spinal processes. So like you're really not going to get much out of them by mashing over that thing with a giant foam roller. And then number two, there's the possible risk of injury. You're putting your entire body weight on, these little tiny spinal processes that aren't really designed to deal with all that. So I do not love foam rolling for the lower back, but that doesn't mean that I will not do SMR for the low back. I can always use like a Theracane and reach around the backside and work on that like so. I mean, she's kind of in her upper back here, but you can very much get into that erector spinae by just being off to the side, or it's really not that difficult to use a lacrosse ball on the erector spinae. So you just take that lacrosse ball, place it barely off to the side of those spinal processes. Hold on. Just off to the side there, and you can get into those ridges and you can lay down, and that can actually be a really comfortable way to sort of get a little bit of massage in there. Then there are even little tiny things you can do. You can try to rotate your pelvis from that lying position. Even taking your arms up and down can sometimes pull on that. We call it the thoracolumbar fascia. That can kind of move that around. So you're almost doing like a little bit of a pin and stretch by doing those dynamic movements there. But again, this is going to require coaching tips. So, I might say for the erector spinae, use lacrosse or do not place on spine or something like that, right? So there's 3 really good ones that I can work on there. Again, I'm going to do 1 set, 30 seconds each on. So then if I want to get into particularly the hip flexors here, I can do a static kneeling hip flexor stretch. The NASM classic version of that right out of your textbook. It's going to be right here. So you can see this is off their YouTube channel here, actually. So she's going to go 1 leg forward, lunge it forward like that, squeezing that opposite glute. And then if she wants to, she can take her arm up. That can give her a bit of a deeper stretch by also stretching out those iliopsoas. But particularly one of my favorites is the rear foot elevated static kneeling hip flexor stretch. So one that I find particularly helpful, and I probably wouldn't use a chair quite so high, but you can take 1 foot up on top of that chair, place this down, and get that knee on something that is nice and padded. Lucky for me, my rug is a little squishy. And then again, I can go forward like this. I can take that arm up and I can squeeze that glute. And that really is just going to get right into the front of that hip there. And get that to kind of loosen up a little bit. Then I'm also getting a really good quadricep stretch, but that is a very specific to the rectus femoris style stretch there. And it's also a super long name. So we're going to go there, 1 set, 30 seconds each, because I got 2 legs. And then from there, we're going to get into a TFL. Now, we already did that 1 TFL stretch earlier where we did the sort of NASM textbook one. So we'll just throw in a slightly different variation here. We will go with, I don't like it quite as much, but we'll go into this version here. So we're going to do the cross leg standing TFL stretch. Okay, it's not bad. It's not quite my favorite. So we'll put that there. Forgot to do my rear foot stretch here. Get my image real quick. Really, that's not bad. Not super far forward, but still pretty good. And lastly, we want to get a nice erector spinae stretch here. Now, your erector spinae is in charge of spinal extension. So, nothing wrong with just doing a little child's pose here, getting a nice little stretch out of it. Like, this is an effective stretch. It's not bad. However, your erector spinae also does transverse rotation. So I'm actually going to put two separate versions of this stretch here because your erector spinae also does a lot of this. So we can do a child's pose. I got nothing against the child's pose in terms of being an erector spinae stretch, but I am probably going to prefer a seated erector spinae with stretch. And we can say like, this version right here is also going to be very, very, very good. So we'll put that one right here. And we'll get a little child's pose action in there. I do not dislike a child's pose stretch. I just think that it's just, if you do have a really tight low back, it's not quite enough to get everything loosened up every time. And that's going to be 30 seconds each. We finally got just, one single-sided exercise for the first time ever. So you can finally write just 30 seconds there, which is also kind of nice. Do you guys want to hear a really inappropriate story? When I was in 5th grade, my teacher, Mr. Babbitt, who would go on to get fired, but because he was a crazy person, he used to call this the Playboy stretch, which all of us 5th graders thought was hysterical, even though like there was no way any of us knew the reality of like what a Playboy was at the time. But he would call it that, and every time, and we would all giggle, and it was like really funny. And then, I moved on with my life through the rest of school, never really saying that again. But then randomly I was with my clients one day and I was like, yeah, we're gonna do this erector spinae stretch. And it just like came out of my mouth as if like I had been saying it. I'd been calling it that for years. I was like, yeah, we're gonna do the Playboy stretch here. And I was like, that was a weird thing to say. And then like that caused me to like think more. And I was like, that is a wildly inappropriate thing to say in front of 5th graders. Like, like as an adult, like looking back, I was like, what, And then I remember how upset all of us were when Mr. Babbitt got fired. And now I'm like, yeah, no, like that's, that form follows function. Like, not surprising now that I look back on it as an adult. But anyway, I just remember like never putting that together for years and years. So there we go. There's our general movement prep for a client. We've turned off our overactive sort of tight stuff. So moving into our underactive weak stuff here, we're going to take a look. We can see gluteus maximus, gluteus medius, abdominals, but primarily the stabilizers, and hamstrings. So if I'm doing like a full 4 exercise movement prep here, which again is actually kind of a lot, you don't necessarily have to go through 4 exercises every time. Usually I'll do 1 or 2 core exercises and maybe 1 balance exercise. But we're building a pretty comprehensive sort of like homework based program here. You're really not going to be, planks are really, really great. Bird dogs are going to be really, really good. But you're really not going to be just your classic like floor bridge. It's just a terrific exercise directly focused on hip extension to turn on those glute muscles. So we look at a floor bridge, it is really terrific. Now, do you want to do like a floor bridge, maybe with a little bit of abduction there? If you want to throw like a resistance band around the knees and get like a little bit of like pushing out action while you do that to really focus even on a bit further glute action, I have nothing against that. We'll go ahead and use that as our example today, even just because it is really primarily focused on getting those glutes fully activated. So we'll say floor bridge with abduction, right? But for me, it's not necessarily like something I have to do every time. If I'm really just trying, if I got a client who just has super stubborn glutes that I really cannot get turned on, regular old floor bridge is really going to do a lot of good work there. So we'll go with the floor bridge with abduction though for today. And then let's get another really good exercise focused on like spinal stability. In the video, we saw the bird dog. That was a really good option. But one of my all-time favorites is what's called the McGill curl up. So showing another little video here, just talking about like core stabilization. Like I said, you know, a lot of people really do way too much. Like they're focused on like trying to move their spine so much, you know? And what we want to see is like, you're trying to fix a stabilizing issue by introducing new movement. It's probably not our best bet, you know? So instead, going with something like a hollow rock hold, this is a pretty advanced exercise. Not a lot of clients are going to be able to do this right out the gate. But even just, I know it looks a little goofy. She's just kind of rocking back and forth. This is a shockingly difficult freaking core exercise. Much, much, much harder than it looks. Or you could even just do, she's doing the rock as well. These are all CrossFit videos. But just the hollow rock hold, where you just create this really, really long lever with your legs and a really long lever with your arms. Even that is going to be enough to really get a lot of very, very good spinal stability. A regression to that I really, really like is the McGill curl up. And the McGill curl up is an incredibly simple exercise all by itself. And it's a really good regression to the hollow rock. It is an upside down plank, right? Oh, she's got a lot of head movement. Okay, that's a lot of head movement. Not my favorite demo. But you can see she's not doing a ton of spinal movement. She's really just kind of, oh God. Yeah, you know what? Let's get off this. That's not the demo that we are looking for. No, instead, something like this, we're just going to kind of get up there, one leg out, and you can see he barely reaches his shoulder blades in his head just up off the floor. So gravity wants to pull that down. He's got to create spinal stability here. And then he can also really focus on creating like those vacuums. And he can really focus on like breathing into his entire core there. It's a fantastic exercise. So this exercise is called the McGill curl up because it's named after the guy who came up with it, Dr. Stuart McGill. He's a physical therapist. He's kind of the king of like core stability and core rehabilitation. So I got a really good video here for you that's going to kind of break this down. This is the McGill Big Three. These are 3 spinal exercises, all focused on spinal stabilization. You'll see some of them from our NASM video here as well, but here we go.
All right, guys. So today we're going to talk about the 3 core stability exercises you should do every day.
Sorry, his intro is really loud.
You heard that one word in that phrase, it was stability. I'm not going to be talking to you guys about the 3 dynamic core exercises to work your abs. This is a stability video, meaning the emphasis is on limiting excessive or unwanted motion at our spine so that we can have awesome carryover to the exercises that we're looking to perform in the gym, like your squat, your deadlift, your bench, your clean, and snatch. If you do these exercises, I promise you, you will feel much more powerful in each one of those movements. So let's talk about what the exercise grouping is called, the McGill Big Three. Now these are based off of the research from renowned back expert, Dr. Stuart McGill. Now Dr. McGill has spent his entire life working on how to stabilize the spine and understand how the way in which we use our spine leads to certain types of injuries. Now, whenever we're trying to keep our spine resilient to injury, under load, we want to brace it.
That is obnoxious.
Lock it into place and then move about our hips. So the different exercises that we do today, starting off with the curl up, are going to emphasize that. Now, when a lot of people work the front of their core, what do? They do crunches. They move their spine. Look at my spine right now. It is flexing up and back down. Now, while that's not a bad exercise at working the front of your core through movement to strengthen your rectus abdominis or 6-pack muscles, I want to emphasize stability. I want to limit any motion at my spine. So what am I going to do? drop one foot. Now, if you're not in pain, doesn't matter which one. You're gonna have your hands underneath your low back. Now, these hands are pressure sensors. They're going to pick up if you round your back. So keep your hands here to feel for whether or not that happens. What you're gonna do is brace your core. You're gonna turn all those muscles on, and then you're gonna pick your head up just slightly off the floor and hold for 10 seconds. The hold is the most important part of this. We're not just moving our spine, we're trying to emphasize stability by getting those muscles to kick on and lock the spine in place. So this is what it's gonna look like. Brace, pick the head up slightly, hold for 10 seconds. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then back down. Now, if you're feeling your neck is a little turned on and maybe just a little bit stiff while you're doing this, all you're gonna do is tuck your chin first. So just tuck your chin a little bit and then pick up. And that may help a lot as far as taking some tension off the front of your neck. But again, this is a slight pickup of the head. What I don't wanna see is this. Don't pick your head up this high. All you have to do is pick it up slightly. And by holding it here and keeping your core braced, all these muscles on the front side of your spine, like your rectus abdominis, your transverse abdominis, all those muscles are turning on really, really hard to basically stiffen the spine. Now, back down, something like this, do 6 reps in a row, and I promise you, you'll feel those muscles working. Now, what does that exercise do? Like I said, it's working the front of our spine. There is no one size fits all when it comes to hitting all the parts of your spine, because there's a lot of muscles that make up the core. So we need a different barrage of exercises to really hit all parts. Now the next one, let's do, how do we hit the side? Side plank. Now, you're gonna get down on your side from your elbows. Now the modified version is usually one of the most easy go-to exercises. You're just gonna pick up and hold in this position. Now this is a great exercise for hitting that downside part of your core and your lateral hip, your glute medius. So if you have a very weak or poorly coordinated glute medius, lateral hip muscles, you'll feel this working there too. Again, 10 seconds and then back down. Something like this, 6 reps on each side. Now if this is really easy, how do you modify it? Let's go to a full plank. From here, when you put our hands here, this is step 1. If that's too easy, put your hands here. Again, we're holding for 10 seconds. We're turning on those muscles of the spine. We're limiting excessive unwanted motion. I want that spine here and I don't want to twist. We're limiting excessive or unwanted motion of the spine and stabilizing and locking it in place. So again, 6 reps each side, 10 seconds. Now we're gonna go to the last part. We've hit the front, we've hit the sides, let's hit the back. Now, when most people think, how do I work the back? What do? They're trying to work back extensions, Supermans, things like that. You're moving your spine into an overarch, into extension. What do we want to do? We want to limit excessive or unwanted motion of the spine, lock it in place in a neutral position, and stabilize around that. The bird dog is a great exercise for that. Very low load on the spine, but working those muscles, the erectors of your spine very well. This is what you're going to do. Get on all fours. Now again, find that neutral position. So you're not rounded, you're not overarched. Find that middle position from right here. You're gonna brace your core and you're gonna go opposites. So we're gonna go right hand extension, left leg kick out. We're gonna go out and we're gonna hold it for 10 full seconds. Now, after that 10 seconds, keep the spine braced. This is the part where a lot of people mess up on, is we're gonna slowly come back, not move your spine, touch, back out. Hold for another 10 seconds. We're sweeping under our body. If you think about this, what's happening at my hips? Flexion and then back. This is like a squat as far as the motion that's occurring. Back flat, no motion at the hips. I don't want this, because what just happened? I lost my neutral spine in my back. So as you go out, you're holding, you're keeping that core braced. Hold for 10 seconds, sweep back under the body, touch, and then back out. Now, common mistakes that I see with this exercise. First, kick the leg way too high. Now watch my back while this happens. I'll just do the leg movement, but people do this. What happened to my back? It overarched, it extended. I want that foot only a couple inches off the ground. Watch the difference. Overarch, I'm gonna keep it just a couple inches off the ground. Do you see the difference? So we're able to keep that core in a little bit better position because we're keeping our hips moving as they should, because the hips directly affect the spine. Next thing, I want you to think about really making a fist as hard as you can with your arm. And when you do that, you're gonna light up some of those muscles of your upper back as well. If you do the bird dog correctly and create as much tension from fist to foot, this is gonna be tough. You should be sweating by the time you're done with this. So watch how I do that with a lot of emphasis also in my fist making a lot of tension. So we're here, brace, fist, out. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Under, tap, back out. And again, 10 seconds. Now, if that is too tough for you and you're wobbling all over, how do you regress? You can do that with only the hips. So just be here and just extend the leg. Hold that for 10 seconds and back. Or if that's even too tough, you can do it where you're just moving your arms. But again, the end goal is just going all the way out and holding. A way that you can again progress that, if you want to add in just a little bit more dynamic movement of your arms, is going out and you can draw some squares. Again, emphasizing core stability. While extremities are moving, that is the end carryover that we're looking for in our core stability work, because it's applicable to the way in which you move in the gym. Stable core, movement of extremities. I have been doing personally the McGill Big 3 before every single workout for the past year, and I've seen crazy carryover into how well and how powerful I'm moving during my workout. On my off days, I still do this. I do a set of 6 for 10 seconds of each exercise. If I don't have a lot of time, if I have time, I do a descending rep scheme pyramid. 6 reps, 4 reps, 2 reps. If you want to do more, 8, 6, 4, 2. But again, the hold is the most important. You must do a 10-second hold to emphasize that stability, to limit the excessive or unwanted motion of the spine moving. We want to keep that spine locked in place while we move the rest of our extremities. But again, the McGill Big 3, I want you to start doing this. I promise you, you will find a huge carryover to how you feel and how you're moving in the gym. Hope you guys like today's quick.
So, really terrific video on just like core stability. I would say you could throw any one of those exercises in a program for a client with an anterior pelvic tilt, and it's going to do really, 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 really good work. But for today, we're just going to get the 2 in there, a little bit of a floor bridge with abduction, and we'll do a McGill curl up there as well. Getting into a little bit of balance stuff. Again, we're focused on getting our glutes turned on here. So we might go with like a single leg lift and chop. That is a fantastic balance exercise. Again, you're standing on one leg like so. You're gonna have a medicine ball, a kettlebell, a dumbbell, whatever piece of equipment you want to use, but we're gonna go right here and we're just gonna lift that up and over to the other side. Speaking of balancing, good Lord. And then we're gonna lose that right back down. So we're gonna bring that up and over here and then right back down. So you can do it on both sides. Right. Again, this is one where I'd probably split those reps in half, because your shoulders end up doing twice as much work as the rest of your body. So that's not so good. But single leg lift and chop's a really good one. Your glutes gotta stay active there and really drive itself into the ground and get that nice and turned on. We also might see another really good balance one, or maybe another really good core one if you want to do that. But again, we go back to what we're focused on here. Glutes, hamstrings, is there a good balance hamstring exercise out there? Not really in the stabilization level, just because it really is mainly focused on spinal stability and your hamstring, and your leg's going to be kind of locked out there. But other really good ones that we've got, you can do like a single leg scaption, terrific exercise, dumbbells in hand. Standing on one leg, and we're just going to lift out like so and bring that back to neutral. We could do single leg external rotations, right, or hip openers. A lot of really terrific options. Tell you what, well, actually, I guess the other one's a little bit more glute based, so we'll go with like the single leg hip internal external rotation. So floor bridge with abduction. that real quick. How's the demo here? That's a lot, actually. Nope. I will say, don't make the mistake of doing these like massive wide range of movement there. Floor, bridge, abduction. You really just want to get it to where the band's pulling enough. Yeah, we're not looking for like this huge like swing there. Good Lord, tons of way too much. Everybody in the world. Let's just do a floor bridge with, say, a banded floor bridge.
Then bridge into an
There we go. Love it. I don't love that she's on a big squishy pad and she's letting her toes come up. That will put it into the hamstrings a little bit, but I'm clearly having trouble finding a good demo here. So we're gonna go with that one. We'll get that McGill curl up in there. I'm trouble getting a good version of that as well, but I think I liked where the one go? You know what? How's this? Oh boy. Man. That's here, and that's actually a little bit more of an advanced approach too. He's actually doing the switch halfway. That's sort of a progression. I actually really like that. We'll use that as a bit of a progression, not really the purest form, but leg lift and chop. Another really good one, just focused on that glute stability, lifting one leg up over, or lifting one arm up over to the opposite side. So again, kind of brings that back down. And then single leg, hip, internal, external rotation. For the record, he's doing the single leg airplane, which I do like better. But we're just gonna go with our basic version. Sometimes it can be pretty hard to find the right demos for videos if you're doing that for your clients, but well worth it if your clients really have a hard time remembering how to do their homework. Yeah, I like it. I have to turn it on a little bit, which I don't like, but that's okay. Okay, so again, we're gonna kind of go, like, let's draw a parallel between this one and our last program. We had 2 sets of 15 each, right? Totally same phase of training, just a different client. So we're gonna go 2 sets again. With that abduction, we're gonna go 15 total. McGill curl up. Now I will say McGill curl up is a little bit of a weird one to do reps for because you're going to do it for these big long pauses. So we might actually bring that rep scheme down. Let's go with like 8 reps there. We'll get 8 each there because their shoulders end up working the whole time. And then that external rotation, we'll go 8 each on that one as well. Slow tempo there. For the McGill curl up, we're going to put slow tempo. And then under coaching tips, we're going to say, hold each rep 4. If I'm trying to get an isometric, I usually try to get around the 30-second marker. So if you think about it, it's like, 30 divided by 8. It's going to use out like 3-4 seconds each. So we're going to say hold each rep for 4 seconds. I think he did 6 seconds in the video, but lift and chop, slow, external rotation, slow, 0 seconds of rest. 60 seconds of rest at the end. So again, very good for stabilization. Now, similar to what we did last time, and speaking of pulling in different exercises, again, if my client moves into phase 3, right, I would just change all of these things to active versions of the stretches, right? Maybe I would do 2 sets of everything. And then I would say, let's say 10 reps each. Now, child's pose, you're not going to really do that for reps, so maybe I'll swap that one out for like a cat-cow exercise, which is also going to have a little bit of an erector spinae stretch there. So we'll go 10 reps each. That spinal twist also probably not going to work very well as an active stretch unless I just simply twist for 2 and then let go every time. But I could very easily do like a 90-90 spinal twist. For those of you who don't know what that is, you look that up. That's this version right here. Actually, that hip opener is really good, but is that a video? Yeah, video. So she's here, she opens up, brings it to the other side, holds it for 2 seconds, and brings it back in. Now, there's an argument to be made that that also is a really good dynamic stretch rather than just active. Typically, active stretches are a little bit less range of movement. But I think that would fit really well in this program here. If I wanted to get a little bit more strength-based, again, and I wanted to start like moving my core more, stability ball crunch would be a really great option. Right? Or a cable wood chop would also be a really good one. Right now, I've got 2 exercises for my core that are a little bit more dynamic than they were last time. For my balance, honestly, this is where I would really get into like firing the glutes up with like a single leg squat. And then I'd maybe do like a single leg squat with touchdown. Now, there's only a tiny difference between those two, but they do target things ever so slightly. So a single leg squat is very squat based, right? I'm going to keep my chest up. I'm going to look towards the other side of the room, standing on one leg, and I'm going to move this balance leg through a much more dynamic range of movement by squatting down, right? And you look at that mechanics of that, it looks similar to a barbell squat, right? The single leg squat with touchdown is probably the dumbest named exercise in your textbook because really more than anything, it's much more related to your traditional deadlift. And so a single leg squat with touchdowns, I'm going to reach with my contralateral hand towards that foot. And I'm going to allow my chest to come a little bit lower. Whoop, and not lose my balance, touch, and then come back up. Look at my form here, guys. You can see it's much more of a hinge action, and I look very similar to how I would look in a deadlift. So it is a very dumbly named exercise. Like single leg squat with touchdown seems super similar, but they are only similar in the sense that they're both for your legs. I think of one as much more similar to a deadlift. So this is a little bit more glute and hamstring. This is a little bit more glute and quad. But my client needs both, you know, they need that glute nice and turned on. So I've got a little bit of more core work here on the front side of my abs, which again, that's the side where my underactive muscles are. I got a lot of really glute specific work back here for my hip extension. And then I would turn all those into active stretches for all those tight muscles. So again, there is a really big list of exercises. There's a lot of different ways you can approach this. And the same client just gets a sort of evolved version of what used to be their workout, you know? But like I said, typically in the world of stabilization, in the world of corrective exercise, we're mostly focused on stabilization. So our sort of purest classic example of how to fix an anterior pelvic tilt is going to be here in phase 1. So we're going to call this, what do I call my last one? Hold on, what was my last? Pes plana stabilization. Yeah, so this is anterior pelvic tilt. Okay. You guys know the drill. Questions, comments, concerns. How y'all feeling? I'm popping up. All right. Okay, so we got to move through one more here. Let's go ahead and take a look at the arms falling forward as an issue. So upper cross syndrome, arms fall forward, shoulder rounding, whatever you want to call it. Upper cross syndrome typically being the sort of most common version of them, right? We're going to see another sort of example here of like tight muscles on one side of the joint and weak muscles on the other. Now, I will say, I don't, they're really trying to shoehorn in this whole concept of like the cross, you know? Some of these muscles I do not think are perfectly doing this, just like they're not perfectly like on the back side or front side. But you can kind of see it here, you know, they do a decent job of it. Like I don't consider like the levator, for instance, is really more kind of off to the side there. Same thing with your upper traps, but yeah, it works. So let's go ahead and take a look here. Upper cross syndrome, characterized by forward head posture. What happened here? Forward head posture and rounded shoulders. So just go ahead and move this out of the way again, because it is pretty helpful. So we are seeing excessive forward head posture, which when we say forward head posture, what we mean by that is like, you know, we're seeing excessive like spinal translation, right? Now, the reason this exercise, this problem is almost a little bit more advanced, a little bit tougher to deal with, is because like spinal translation is more like your head jutting forward more than it is like your head flexing forward. So we're going to see like one of our weak muscles here is our deep cervical flexors, which always confuses people because it's like, why would the deep cervical flexors be something I want to strengthen when I have way too much like spinal flexion? Like, why am I working on? And it's really more of a synergist problem. So again, like we're seeing tightness on one side, this sort of anterior like forward head posture, but you're gonna notice that like this is kind of screwing up like where I put my cross syndrome. So I'm actually gonna weirdly just move this to the backside over here. That's gonna make that make a little bit more sense when we're looking at this in sort of a chart form here. And then we're also seeing very much, kind of go back to our overactive, underactive list, all right? We're seeing not enough like, you know, spinal translation on the posterior side. So opposite of forward head posture, we're seeing limited spinal posterior spinal translation, which again, that's the part that's going to kind of pull our head back and up. Weirdly, we are going to see a deep cervical flexor be there. So these two are, again, opposites of each other right here. So too much of what we're seeing on one side, not enough of what we're seeing on the other side. And then we're also seeing rounded shoulders, right? Protracted shoulders. So we're definitely going to see some tightness in our pectoral muscles, which are internal shoulder rotators, as well as shoulder protractors. So we are seeing excessive shoulder protraction. Right, so no surprise there, which means we are seeing limited. We're seeing limited shoulder retraction. And there we go. So what muscles are going to primarily be sort of causing all this? Well, if we sort of look at our overactive muscles here, seeing the upper trapezius, the levator scapulae, and the sternocleidomastoid. So your upper trapezius is this, you know, you look at your trapezius muscles and you think of them as like synergists, right? They're all traps muscles. Like, shouldn't they all sort of be working together? You know, that makes sense, right? Well, again, if you sort of look at like what they do, me zoom in just a little bit here, right? Our upper trapezius, look at these fibers, guys. They pull up like this. So they're in charge of like scapular elevation. They're working much more with like the levator scapulae than anything, really we're just seeing that. Now your lower trapezius, they're down here. They're doing the exact opposite. They were in charge of like scapular depression, right? And then all of them are sort of pulling towards their midline. So they are synergizing towards scapular retraction, but the middle trapezius should be the main scapular retractor there. Look at like the direction these are all pulling. So when you see a client with like way too much like trap action here, it's like, dude, get those shoulders down. We need to activate those lower trap muscles. We're seeing upper trapezius for sure. We're also seeing the levator scapulae here. Now this muscle, you take a look at it, right? It's grabbing it elevates the scapula. Literally, it's in the name, right? It also does a little bit of like rotation of the neck, which is one of the ways we're going to get a nice deep stretch out of it. But let's take a look at the lateral view here. And you can see this muscle actually kind of runs at a forward angle like this. So now imagine your scapula, right? Both of those like little, kind of triangular bones are kind of hanging off the back of your shoulder blades like this, right? And so now there's a muscle that's pulling it up and forward like that. So it causes this scapular dumping action where like, my shoulder blade ends up like rounding forward like this. My upper trap doesn't just like elevate my scapula, it also elevates and pulls my scapula like forward and rounds it, right? So again, like that's a very common like tight muscle that we really want to like I want to be able to raise my shoulder blades up. I might need to do that, but like I definitely want to make sure I'm using the right muscles to do that rather than like see this like super intense like rounding action there. So we're seeing like upper trapezius, levator scapula, and then this one's the easiest to understand, your sternocleidomastoid, right? Right there on the front of the neck. Yeah, obviously that one's like pulling our head forward. Sterno for being attached right here, cleido for your clavicle, and then it goes to your mastoid process. Again, this is one that causes it's not just spinal flexion, it's translation of the spine. Like we're craning our head forward when we use this muscle. So we're seeing some real tightness in there. We kind of go back to this. Wrong one. We kind of go back to this. We're seeing some tightness, excessive forward head posture, again, from the sternocleidomastoid. We're seeing it from the levator scapulae, and we are seeing it from the upper trapezius. And I want all of those in italics, not bolded, and I want it to fit. So that's very much causing our, forward head posture part. And again, it's tough because the sternocleidomastoid is totally on the front of the neck here. Like it would be on this side of things, but it kind of breaks the little cross syndrome nickname thing that they have going here. For the this posterior chain, now this is a surprising one, but we are going to see our deep cervical flexors. Now those are on the front of the neck, but like these are what we want to strengthen. Now this is an example of like a synergist muscle, right? Your sternocleidomastoid and your deep cervical flexors, they are right next to each other. They are literally all those muscles, they live right here on the front of the neck. So like they're supposed to be synergized together, you know what I mean? Like they're supposed to work with that sternocleidomastoid, but we just kind of end up using the wrong one all the time. That SCM muscle kind of takes over for everything, causing this like very, very severe like arch, right? So what we really kind of want to see that nobody ever wants to do is we kind of want that like double chin action, right? Again, if you guys remember from Thursday, I like to call it like the smelly hand technique. And it's like, I want you to imagine my hand smells real bad and I'll put it in their face and they'll go, right? Like, this is what I want. I want you to tuck your chin and pull back. You can also say, look, I want you to imagine there's like a string Like I'm pulling your head up and like you want to be a little bit taller, right? You're going to get that with that little bit of deep cervical flexion there. And that's going to put your spine into a neutral spot so you're looking forward rather than what we normally do, which is this kind of thing, right? We round our shoulders and then our head comes up into this like kind of weird scooping action. So there's, you know, the kind of opposite, like it's not an antagonist muscle to the sternum, it's a synergist, right? But that's what we're kind of focused on. Now, in terms of excessive like shoulder protraction, we go back over here, pectoralis major, which isn't much of a shoulder protractor, but it is a shoulder internal rotator. So that internal rotation kind of causes my shoulder blades to come up and around because my scapula needs to be able to like facilitate that. And then we are also seeing very much that pectoralis minor. That one is directly a shoulder protractor, right? We look at the pec minor here directly. I mean, it's grabbing the scapula right there on the coracoid process and like pulling it straight forward. It is directly in charge of this. But again, think about like your scapula and how it's shaped, right? Like it's grabbing the top of the scapula, dumping it forward, causing this rounding action. So for our tight muscles, we are going to see in terms of shoulder protraction, we're going to see the pectoralis major and pectoralis minor. Now, in terms of underactive muscles that we also want to strengthen, well, we got to get into our shoulder retractors. So we go back to our list here. We've already addressed the deep cervical flexors, but now we just need those rhomboids, middle and lower trapezius. So definitely the rhomboids, right between the shoulder blades, pinching directly back. Definitely the middle trapezius, right? Again, that's a shoulder retractor directly. And then lastly, lower trapezius, which, you know, is going to help us depress those shoulder blades as we're pulling that back. There's one more muscle that didn't make this list directly because it just breaks people's brains. So I think Nassim just didn't kind of want to deal with it. But one more that should be like a shoulder protractor that we actually want to use. I don't even know where to put this. We're going to see the serratus anterior or anterior serratus. This muscle right here, if you look at, actually, there was a picture of it a second ago. Where'd you go? There it is. Lives along the ribs and also is a shoulder protractor, but it protracts the entire shoulder, right? Along the entire scapula. So it rounds like this instead of the way the pec minor rounds like this, right? The pec minor just kind of dumps the scapula forward. We want to keep it nice and upright as it rounds, right? So the difference between, it's a little hard to see here, but that would be the difference between scapular protraction using our serratus, which would be this, versus scapular protraction using our pec minor, which would be that, right? So nice and upright and protracting versus dumping forward like that. So I don't know where to put that in this whole cross syndrome thing, you know, like, because that is definitely living right here on the front side, but it certainly doesn't belong in a red where it's overactive. So Nassim's taking a bit more basic approach. They just kind of act like that's not really part of the problem here. But definitely a muscle that you can strengthen very well for your clients. And you'll notice I got the same muscles listed and the arms falling forward action here. The only difference is the latissimus dorsi didn't quite make the list. Again, that's another one that, like, you know, would probably be back here. So it just kind of breaks the whole cross syndrome, I don't know, example, analogy, whatever you want to call it. All right, we've been bleeding time. My breaks are getting further and further off. Let's give you guys 10. We'll come back for our final bit here. Right at noon, we'll get our program whipped up, and I'll let you out for the day. All right, so tick 10, 11:49, we'll be back at 11:59. And you'll see what my cat was scratching the door for. Okay. So let's wrap up our program design here. So now we got a good list. Again, we understand our anatomy. We got a pretty good list of what's going on here. Tight, weak, turn off some muscles, turn on the others, right? So same process, new client, or maybe even the same client, but maybe this is their upper body focused day, that's also an option here. So we're going to say again, correct, forward, head posture, or upper, I guess I should say upper cross syndrome. And we're going to put this also in phase 1. So now we need to come up with a very different list of what to focus on foam rolling here, right? We take a look at our overactive stuff. We want to do a little bit of SMR on, right? We're are we going to work manually on maybe that like sternocleidomastoid a little bit? We could, but our client's probably not going to necessarily have the skills to do that properly. So definitely wouldn't place a foam roller on the neck or anything like that. Levator scapulae, upper trapezius, those are also ones that we certainly can. And then pec major and pec minor, that's actually really hard to get in there with a foam roller. So we can still list this very similarly, but we're probably going to have to tell our client they're going to need some specific tools. Similar to, we go back to like our first program today, if we wanted to get that biceps femoris, we got to use a lacrosse ball, right? So we'll go back here. And we're going to say SMR, because SMR is just self-myofascial release. It doesn't mean foam rolling, right? Foam rolling is just an example of an acceptable way to do SMR. So we're going to do SMR, and we're going to go on to the upper trapezius. We're going to get into that pectoralis minor. And we're going to get into just the thoracic spine in general, because that's a pretty good way to sort of like work on the levator over there as well. So we're going to say levator scapulae. Now, in terms of like specialized equipment, again, well, in terms of sets, again, that's going to be one set, 30 seconds each. No surprise there. But for the upper trapezius, we're probably going to need like a theracane. And we're probably going to need a lacrosse ball on the pec minor. So for rolling your thoracic spine, that's pretty easy to do. Right? You're just going to kind of take that foam roller. You can play around with your angles a little bit on this. But you can take your arms up overhead. You can cross your shoulders over each other. Like so. There's a lot of things you can do to sort of mess with your angles, expose different upper back muscles and stuff. Point is, you're definitely staying, at least in line with the scapula. You don't really want to get into that low back. But he's going hands behind his head. He could take his arms up like so. He could cross them over here. A lot of different things to sort of expose that. But we're just going to kind of generally get into the upper back there and sort of try to release any of those. For the pec minor, that's where a lacrosse ball becomes really, really, really helpful. It's a little bit more of a challenging one for me to always find like a good video of. But you can see I think this guy actually in this one, he's using like a physio ball instead of just like a small lacrosse ball. But you can get in there, take your arm out into horizontal abduction and just kind of generally work right onto that coracoid process. Personally, I find it much, much, much better to get in there with like a lacrosse ball, just using like a doorway. So finding that coracoid process right there in the front, that little bony landmark, that's going to be the origin for that pec minor. And I'll just kind of go up to a doorway, give that a little press, and hopefully get like a nice release there. So you can see she's going to press that right into the coracoid, and she's going to kind of generally find that. Now, again, she does want to do any little bit of rolling. She's going to roll at an angle kind of like this, because that is heading downwards towards the ribs there. But for the most part, you just kind of find that pressure and hold. Oh, and she makes a good point there. Don't Keep that shoulder down. I know this one can be a little tender, a little tight sometimes, but it's always tempting to like do that when you're like, ah, God, that hurts. Just try to keep those shoulder blades down if you can. That's going to be a really, really good one there. Then in terms of getting into that upper trapezius, kind of a similar concept here, but I find like a Theracane's really, really good. For the record, you actually can use the lacrosse ball on that as well. You just kind of go like right along the ridge of the scapula. In fact, I'm sure I'm going to see a bunch of pictures. Yeah, you can go like this. She's using a tennis ball, but like that's actually not terrible. Works pretty well. I just find the problem with it is that like this muscle runs like this. You're pushing this way. You're kind of coming at the wrong angle of like the fibers. So I find you're much better off just Theracane right over the shoulder, boop, give it a pull down. Weirdly, guys, what I will often do, because I don't like lugging a Theracane around with me, it just takes up a lot of space in a gym bag, like a lacrosse ball, toss it in there and you're good to go. Foam roller even, while that's pretty bulky and large, it fits into a bag pretty well, but what I will often do, this guy's doing this with the barbell, but I actually do something somewhat similar. Go over to a Smith machine, rack it, put a little bit, you can put some weight on if you want, but you can kind of just keep that bar down. But I'll literally just go right under the Smith machine and just stand up into that bar, and that bar will press down at just the right angle. And then I'll just kind of move that around until I can find it. It looks a little goofy, I know. It looks like a cat, like marking their territory, like rubbing on something. But honestly, it's actually a really good release. The problem is it's a freaking metal bar. That's a lot harder than a lacrosse ball. That's a lot harder than a foam roller. So, you do got to kind of like manage how hard you're pushing into that bar. But that is actually what I will often do. But with my clients, I'm going to tell them, let's use a Theracane. So use a Theracane on the upper trapezius, give that downwards push. Use a lacrosse ball on the pec minor there. Both those are going to be really, really good releases. So hopefully get that arm mobility back. Then again, we're going to go into our stretches here. So we're going to go with a static. Go back to our list. Upper trapezius stretch. That one's really easy. And it's technically an upper trapezius / scalenes stretch. So you can get both these muscles stretched simultaneously with just a very tiny adjustment. So if I go here and I want to stretch out my upper trap, that's pretty easy, right? Like this muscle is in charge of this. So I can even get just a very tiny stretch, just kind of generally depressing down like that. But it also does lateral flexion of my head. So I'm just going to take my head over to one side. I can take my arm up and give that just like a little bit of downward pressure. This is a pretty good upper trap stretch right out the gate. But if we look at the anatomy of our scalenes, which are in the exact same spot and also are sort of a contributing factor here, you look at them, the attachment side is very, very similar, right? Right there along like our spinal processes. But this runs to the ribs, right? So these actually are running to our rib bones right there. So one of the ways you can actually get a little bit of extra depression there is I always tell people, I want you to imagine your keys are on a little table that is just out of reach. So, and then we have too much like shoulder rounding. So just for the sake of that, I'm going to tell my client to do this with a forward palm. That way they get into external shoulder rotation. So take this up and over. And then you're just reaching with that opposite hand. Just, try to depress that arm down and reach for those keys. And you'll feel that stretch run into your bicep actually a little bit as well. Really, really good one. Big fan. So that is our upper trapezius / scalene stretch. Right here. Oh, actually, and here's another really good one. You can also do that in a chair. If you pull on the chair, right, that's also similar to reaching down for those fake keys. Oh shoot, she's also, never mind. She's doing the behind the back version. Another really popular version. Sorry, third version I want to show you. So hand here, and then this. I don't like this one quite as much because again, you'll notice now my hand is actually into internal rotation. But that is also a pretty decent one right there. Taking the arm back behind. Hopefully that's not the only demo I can find. He's doing the chair one, but again, now he's doing the chair one. He's got an overhand grip, so he's pronated. Let's just try that and see if I get a better result. Although I do think I just saw one. Pop it back. Let's go, Duke University. So yeah, actually we'll use this one. So yeah, it's a bit of a long explanation, but hey, that's all right. So static upper trapezius / scalenes stretch there. Just gonna put that one in as video form just because it is kind of technical. These other ones, it's a little bit more simple. So from there, we're gonna go with a static sternocleidomastoid stretch. That one is a little bit simpler. Take a look here. So your sternocleidomastoid is right here. So we are going to do kind of a similar angle, pulling off to the side. The only difference is this muscle wants to turn us this way. So we're just going to turn it up like that. We're going to have an ever so slight upward angle there. Now, my favorite variety of this stretch is also to do a little bit of bone distraction. So I will actually press on my collarbone to depress that a little bit while I'm trying to stretch this muscle. So I'll go across my body with this arm here and give that a little press, and then I'll take my head up and over in the opposite direction, like so, which obviously now I can't do the head pull with the opposite side. But I always find that to be a little bit of a deeper SCM stretch there. So, I mean, I guess I could technically come back and around, this way, like he's doing. But personally, I find that I just like simply give that a little like bone distraction, turn that over, and just kind of lean away there. So let's just, you know what, we're going to go with the basic version. So slight upward angle for that sternocleidomastoid. And then we've obviously got our pectorals. So I love like a good pec minor wall stretch. Now on this one, as you're seeing it, this is sometimes called a doorway stretch. This is a pretty good example. Just don't make the mistake, guys, of letting your elbow hang super far down here while you do that pullback, because that can kind of cause like rotation in there. You kind of want to have this sort of upward angle. Just get your elbow 3 to 6 inches above like the middle of your chest, and that will, again, remember your pec minor is drawing at an angle like this. So just a slight upward angle there ensures that like you can get into that actual pec minor. So again, doorway stretch, as it's sometimes called, but we're going to say static pec minor wall stretch, because I'm pretty sure that's the name of it in your books. All right, so now we've kind of, oh, did I close my list? Oh, did I keep it open all day? No, I didn't. I just opened a new window. So upper traps, sternocleidomastoid pec minor. We want to get one more in there. I would say like these stretches move pretty quick, so we can throw one bonus one in there. Let's get that levator scapulae as well. So static levator scapulae stretch. This is our third angle, So we've finally now gotten sort of the other part of things. This is one that I do actually like to take the arm back, even if it is internal rotation. But that one is going to be right here, just looking to the opposite side. So now you think about it, right? We got the sternocleidomastoid by looking away and up. We got the upper trapezius by looking sideways. We got the levator scapulae by looking down. So kind of 3 angles there for our neck dysfunction stretches here. All 3 of these, you do these, you're going to feel like $1 million. They're great right before you go to bed. But yeah, that really simple sort of like downward angle. You know, you could also do this with the arm if you want. And basically it's the, hey, you know, smell your armpit, right? Easiest way to get your client just to the right angle there. So we're going to go like that. Copy that image address. And there's our static levator scapulae stretch. All right, 1 set, 30 seconds each. All these are double-sided, so that's pretty easy. And there we go. Now we've got a pretty darn good upper body warm-up, you know. So now all we have to do is get the right muscles turned on. We're going to see a lot of scapular retraction. Now, I will say this is where, okay, well, like, how am I going to get some deep cervical flexor action going on? Again, that's that double chin. So we kind of go back to, I wish I hadn't used my McGill curl up already, because that's a really good one here. You can really tuck the chin as you just barely lift those shoulder blades off the floor. That McGill curl up would be great. But a bird dog is also a really good opportunity here, right? So while I'm doing my bird dog, if I go onto that quadruped all fours position and I kick that out, right? I can tuck my chin. I can really focus on activating those deep cervical flexors. And, you know, maybe the hand doesn't smell bad, but maybe the floor does, right? So I'm just going to tuck that chin ever so slightly while I'm doing my bird dogs. I'm going to leave that coaching tip for my client for sure. You know, tuck, chin during exercise, right? So just like totally just keep that nice and tucked while we're doing that. So we look, this is actually, and by the way, you really want to use your NASM terminology. I will say it is not called the bird dog in your book. It is called, this is so dumb. It is called the quadruped opposite arm / leg race. So we get real NASM in here with that term. But, you know, there it is on NASM's little YouTube channel. Oh, Lord. Skip. There. But she does have a really good sort of example here. The one thing I don't like about it, she's got like a very short pause there. Also, I love, you guys know, love my dorsiflexion. I would tell my clients to really push through their heel while they're doing that so they can get a little bit better at that. But that's literally an awesome demo. I'm not going to argue with it. So there's our bird dog. Good core exercise, core stabilization, not focus on too much spinal movement there. Getting another good core exercise in there. Maybe we can get something a little bit more in the frontal plane. Let's finish up. We were doing that McGill big 3. Let's get that side lying iso abs, which is the side plank. So we're going to say side plank with abduction. So it is technically these side lying iso abs as it's listed in your textbook, but that side plank with abduction is just going to be one of my all-time favorite. Actually, I use this with so many of my clients. So you can do that with either a straight leg, or you can do that with a bent knee. We'll go ahead and put a bent knee demo here first, only because most of your clients will actually probably start there. So just right here, one leg at a time, opposite leg comes up and getting it. So a little bit of core stabilization there, and obviously very, very much an intense glute activation. Now for our balance, I used the single leg lift and chop earlier. Dang it, that'd be a really good one here. Because again, that's a great upper back exercise as you're lifting that dumbbell up and over, but I'm trying to give you guys some other examples. So we'll probably go with something simple like a single leg cable row. Now that right there might very much seem like a resistance exercise, and you would be right. That is very much like if I'm literally standing on, one leg and I'm on the cable machine, this is a great upper back exercise, but I can totally use it as a balance stabilization exercise. I'm still on one leg. I'm still stabilizing that one leg, right? So that still makes a pretty darn good option here. Love a good single leg cable row. And then another really good one that's typically a little bit more like shoulder based, maybe like a single leg cable face pull. Okay, finding pictures of this. No one's going to be single leg cable face pull. I doubt I'm going to find this. We're probably just going to see a lot. Oh, never mind. It's like we're probably just going to see a lot of demos of general face pulls. But there we go. Fantastic for that external rotation where I can really get into like scapular retraction, but I can also get a little bit of external rotation. I am super happy that that was actually on the internet. And then single leg cable row as well. Just standing up. Or it's so just standing on one leg, giving that a little bit of a rowing action there. So now, again, the reason I picked these is they are very much just not moving that balance leg. So are they upper back exercises? Yeah, for sure. I could very much, like, if I picked some other balance exercises, these could totally just go down here on my upper body, upper back / shoulder day. 100% they could, but I don't necessarily have to focus on maximal weight here. I'm just focusing on a little bit of retraction. Another really good one that I probably could have thrown in here, by the way, if I wanted to get a little bit of core, that is just a terrific, terrific exercise, is the prone cobra. This is just an awesome exercise here, but do not make the mistake of doing this version. You do not have to bring your head up. Again, I'm going for deep cervical flexors here. So I should be tucking my chin. It should look more something like that. But it's a great, just like scapular retractor exercise. Really just a terrific one where you can really kind of get into just a little bit of external rotation. So you can see his thumbs are up towards the ceiling, and he's just going to pull those shoulder blades back there. Awesome. Awesome freaking exercise. Absolutely love it. He's doing a good job of looking at the floor. He's talking about now, don't do that, right? Don't bring your head up. That has nothing to do with the exercise. So you don't need to. We're going to go 2 sets again. We're going with like 15 reps last time. So we'll go with 8 each on the bird dogs, 8 each on the abductions. Honestly, we'll go with probably 8 each here and 8 each here as well. That one was real simple. Slow tempo because I'm in the stabilization level. And 0 seconds of rest until 60 seconds at the end. That's it, guys. I mean, that's a good part. Again, if this were a strength level client, I would just create dynamic versions of all of these movements, right? Active versions instead of static stretches. Instead of a bird dog, I might go with like a more of like a back extension. Superman actually be a really good one, right? And get a little bit more range of movement there. Instead of the side plank with adduction, a wood chop would probably be fantastic because that's really good for your upper back. Single leg cable row for balance. I might go with like a reverse lunge to row, you know. So like having that cable machine, I might go in like a reverse lunge up to balance and then give it the row. You know, something that's like really quite dynamic and very balance oriented. So again, a lot of ways I can get the right muscles turned on. That's going to help me before I get onto the gym floor and I want to start lifting heavier. You know, these are all really good sort of activation, like, you know, wake my muscles up and use them properly exercises. Upper balance. All right. So I'm going to send out these workouts for you guys. Probably going to include these little images here as well. I'm going to clean them up a little bit, make it a little clearer. But how y'all feeling? I know that was like, it's just kind of sitting there watching me write a lot of programs. And Practicum's a little weird on friggin' Zoom on Brady Bunch mode here, but hopefully you got a chance to kind of see how to plug some of those exercises in, because I am going to want you guys to be able to do that yourselves. But yeah, that's what we got today. How y'all feeling? Pretty solid? All righty.
We're feeling great. Are you sending us the video as well? Today's lectures video?
Yes, I had trouble uploading the other one because it got too long. But I'm gonna try to find something I can do to like press this.
Put it on your YouTube. You can put it on your YouTube, then you give us the link. We go there and watch it.
Yeah, it's just it was like 4 hours last time. Like my
Or you can cut it in half. Cut it in half.
Yeah, that's true. I gotta get an editing software to do that. But I'm gonna see what I can do for you for sure. I had definitely trouble last time, but I will hopefully succeed today. Learn some new skills.
Okay.
All right, guys. So that is about it. I will get in touch with you guys about the rest of this, and yeah, we'll keep trekking through.
Thank you, buddy.
All right, see you guys.
Thank you so much.
Of
Bye.
course. All right, see y'all.
Thanks,
Tomorrow-
Brad. Can't wait to try these out in the gym.
Right? Yeah, the links will work, by the way, so you can just click those. It'll take you right there.
Sweet.
Okay.
I definitely want to try the chop. That's the one I've been meaning to try for a while.
I love the lift and chop. It's good with the kettlebell, by the way. Just flip it upside down.
Oh,
Yeah,
sweet.
hold the kettlebell upside down. Do it safely, but yeah, so that's my favorite variation.
Dude, well, I'll let you know how it goes tomorrow in class. I might be sore.
Love it. I'll take it.
Take care, Brad.
All right, see y'all.
See you
Bye.
tomorrow in class.
Yep, see you tomorrow, LaPatra.
Okay, bye.
Bye.